A person in Marvel takes on the Avengers alone. Hey, fanfic family. So glad to see you here again to continue this incredible adventure. As always, kindly remember, this story is 100% fiction. So don't go looking for dimensional portals in your closet. All rights to this fantastic novel belong to the original author. We're just your humble narrators of epic tales. Are you enjoying the fanfic? Show it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and dropping us a like. And if you're impatient for more exclusive content, our Patreon is your happy place. Chapter 26 Join the Glorious Evolution. Rory and Uncle Frank began a less than pleasant cohabitation. Rory disliked Frank's body odor, and Frank disliked Rory for disliking his own body odor. One evening, Frank returned from an outing to find Rory sitting in front of his computer, holding a bowl of noodles and checking data. Frank sniffed the air, turned, went into the kitchen, took a bowl of noodles from the pot, and imitated Rory by mixing the sauce into them. One bite and he was instantly captivated by the aroma. He ate his bowl while coming over to Rory, complaining, "Honestly, you're more reliable as a chef than a scientist." Rory, without turning around, replied, "You're unreliable at everything." He slurped down a mouthful of noodles, then typed a couple of times on the keyboard, and the data on the monitor immediately changed. Frank didn't understand, and went back to the bed to continue eating his noodles. After finishing his noodles, Rory wiped his mouth with a tissue, then furiously typed on his computer. A moment later, a machine nearby automatically generated a vial of pale blue liquid based on Rory's instructions. He walked over, took out the freshly made, still warm serum, and said to Frank, "Don't wander around tomorrow. The serum is ready. Come with me to the suburbs tomorrow." Rory had wondered why SHIELD had found him, and after much thought, he concluded it was highly likely they were monitoring New York's power grid. Therefore, he planned to take Frank to the suburbs for enhancement experiments, and also prepare an escape route. Frank casually agreed, put down his bowl of noodles, and stood up, saying, "I have some things to take care of tonight. I'll be there at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning." Rory knew he was busy investigating the truth behind his wife and children's murder, so he let him leave. But Frank didn't return until noon the next day. Rory was numb. 2 days earlier, Frank had found one of the murderers of his family through a clue, an agent named Wolf. Frank secretly broke into Wolf's house at night, uncovered the truth, and executed Wolf. However, a national security agency analyst named David was also involved. Knowing Frank was still alive, David needed to determine whether he was friend or foe. So, he secretly infiltrated David's secret base last night. Everything went smoothly until Frank, underestimating David, let his guard down, and was drugged and incapacitated by a tranquilizer disguised as a pen. This caused Frank to miss his appointment with Rory. Fortunately, David harbored no ill will towards Frank and even wanted to lie with him to investigate the truth. Frank obtained more clues from David. The cause was an operation several years ago named Hellhound, which had no record within the department and was not approved by Congress. Frank realized he had been used as a tool by some high-ranking government officials. Now, all clues pointed to the Orange agent who issued the Hellhound mission. "To get revenge, we first need more weapons," David suggested. Frank glanced at the time and calmly said, "I know where it is." Frank hadn't forgotten his date with Rory, and although he was late, he wasn't apologetic at all. Back in Hell's Kitchen, he saw Rory with a sour face as soon as he entered the basement. Frank waved his hand. "Hey buddy, you'd better hurry up and do what you want. There's a lot of things waiting for me to deal with." Rory retorted, "You're the most unreliable friend I've ever met." Frank shrugged, "Maybe." The two left the basement and drove to an abandoned factory that had been set up in advance on the outskirts. Inside the factory was an assembled bioelectric energy conversion chamber. After turning on the power, Rory gestured for Frank to take off his clothes and get into the chamber. Frank didn't hesitate at all. He would do anything to avenge his wife and children. Rory walked to the energy conversion chamber, arranged the serum, and mocked, "It might hurt a lot later. I hope you won't scream too loudly. Hell, it won't hurt as much as what I've been through. I hope you're not just being stubborn." Rory chuckled and pressed the switch. After the chamber door closed, 6 syringes were inserted into various parts of Frank's body. Frank was indeed a tough guy. He didn't utter a sound even with 6 needles inserted into his body. Buzzing as Rory pushed the switch, the voltage gradually increased, and the energy conversion chamber immediately lit up with blue light. Rory had done this kind of experiment many times before and was quite experienced. The slap in the face came very quickly. In less than 20 seconds, Frank's initial whimpers turned into heart-wrenching screams. It was truly a sight to behold. Rory took out a bag of beef jerky and leaned against the control panel, eating while listening to Frank's screams. He only turned off the switch when the energy conversion chamber reached its peak energy. With a hiss, the chamber door opened and a puff of white smoke escaped. Frank staggered forward, then fell face first to the ground with a thud, kicking up a cloud of dust around him. Rory picked up a blanket, walked over, and casually covered the naked Frank with it, then took out a needle and drew a full vial of blood. Frank reluctantly turned his head to look at Rory and said, "I thought you were going to kill me." Rory smiled and said, "I thought you were a real man, but you're more vocal than a woman." Frank's lips twitched a couple of times, but he ultimately gave up on arguing with Rory. Unable to move and lying on the ground, Frank asked softly, "Did it work?" "How should I know? Let's go back first." Rory, worried that SHIELD would come, pulled Frank up from the ground after collecting the blood sample. After Frank got dressed, the two immediately left the factory and drove away. Rory's worries were not unfounded. Sure enough, a dozen minutes later, several cars drove towards the factory. The cars stopped smoothly at the factory gate, and Captain America Steve Rogers, Black Widow Natasha Romanoff, and Hawkeye Clinton Barton followed Peggy Carter into the factory. Seeing the still warm machines inside, Peggy Carter sighed, "Rory is creating more super soldiers. We must catch him as soon as possible." Hawkeye Barton crouched down to examine the footprints. Captain America stepped outside, surveying the surroundings, hoping to spot Rory. Peggy Carter was about to arrange for the equipment to be taken back when Black Widow, Natasha, approached. "Chief Carter," she said, "since that Rory guy is so hard to find, why don't we monitor this place? He might show up again." Peggy Carter considered it and agreed. "Install covert surveillance and alarm systems, assign some men to guard all the main roads leading out of the city, and notify the NYPD to issue a citywide warrant for Rory's arrest." This was the third enhancement test Rory had undergone, putting considerable pressure on Peggy Carter. Chapter 27 What does the danger of what I create have to do with me? Black Widow Natasha and several agents remained at the suburban factory to install surveillance and automatic alarm systems. Peggy Carter, along with Captain America Steve Rogers, took a helicopter to a secret underground research facility of SHIELD located in the suburbs of New Jersey. Security was extremely tight, with guards every few steps. 30 floors underground, the elevator doors opened, revealing several researchers in white lab coats gathered around a table, studying something. Upon seeing Peggy Carter, they immediately stopped their discussion. Peggy Carter approached and asked, "Any progress on the project?" The lead researcher shook his head. "The gene sequence of this rat is very strange. It's not normal helical DNA, but a multi-helical DNA sequence. We simply cannot extract any usable genes from this rat, let alone use them for experiments." Peggy Carter questioned, "Why can't so many of us biological scientists complete an experiment that Rory alone could?" Captain America Steve Rogers then walked to a tempered glass window. Behind the glass was a vast space, and the creature inside nearly scared Steve out of his wits. It was a gigantic rat. It had countless sharp teeth, scarlet eyes, and claws that sent chills down your spine at first glance. It also had a thick, long tail. Only after several checks did you realize it was the carcass of a rat. Steve couldn't understand why SHIELD would research such a horrific thing. Behind him, the researchers were still talking to Peggy Carter. "Director Carter, genetic engineering isn't something you can replicate perfectly through research and experimentation. Gene editing can produce countless variations based on individual will, and that Rory you mentioned must be a great biological geneticist." Peggy Carter frowned. "That's not what I want to hear. I just want to know if we can use this rat's genes. It's difficult." Peggy Carter didn't want to make things difficult for the scientists, so she sighed and waved her hand, signaling them to continue their research. After the researchers left, Steve approached Peggy Carter and questioned, "Peggy, you should know the dangers of Red Skull. Why did we create this biological weapon?" Peggy looked through the tempered glass at the rat carcass inside and explained, "We didn't create it. It was created in 1970 by a biologist named Rory. We just dug it out of the rubble." "Rory? The Rory we captured before? But he was only in his 20s, how could he?" Peggy didn't explain the crude oil to Steve, but said, Rory's potential danger is extremely high. He could even use this enhancement experiment on himself. That's why I captured him. Peggy Carter and Steve Rogers hadn't seen each other for nearly 70 years. Peggy Carter didn't offer much explanation. She was no longer the cheerful and beautiful female officer she once was. She was now the director of SHIELD, responsible for global security and the isolation of the supernatural. Rory took Frank back to Hell's Kitchen. Frank, his body aching all over, lay on the mattress and asked Rory, who was preparing food in the kitchen, "Rory, were you in the same state as I am now when you first enhanced?" Rory denied it. "Of course not. When I first came out, I could fight that other annoying super soldier. You're like this now, you can't even fight a dog, let alone fight." Although both Rory and Frank enhanced, they were fundamentally different. Frank enhanced human genes themselves, using his own internal energy. It's normal for him to be in this state when his energy is depleted. Rory, on the other hand, didn't enhance human genes, he replaced his own with Thanos' genes, consuming the energy from Thanos' serum. Another important reason was that Rory's first enhancement wasn't complete, hence the subsequent gene enhancement plan. A large pot of bone broth was prepared and brought to Frank. "You're currently depleted of energy. Eating this might make you feel better. Remember to clean up this place before you leave, including the toilet." Rory felt like he was serving Frank like a maid, which annoyed him greatly, so he gave him the extra task of cleaning. Rory ate a bowl of rice and a serving of braised pork, leaving the dishes and chopsticks for Frank to wash. After his hearty meal, Rory took Frank's enhanced blood to the lab table. He observed the blood sample, conducted a series of experiments, and then compared the data with Wilson Fisk's blood. Rory nodded in satisfaction. "Frank, your enhancement experiment was very successful. You should be able to recover to normal levels in about 3 days. Your gene activity is about 3 times that of human genes. Congratulations." Frank, while gnawing on a large bone and drinking soup, wolfed down his food and asked, "I don't understand what you're saying. Can you explain it more simply?" Rory put Frank's blood sample away in the refrigerator and explained, "It means that your current physical condition is completely beyond human levels. You know Captain America, right?" Frank nodded blankly. Rory continued, "You and he can fight to draw. Old Popsicle can fight anyone to draw because his broken shield is really hard to break. Steve might not be able to beat others, but others shouldn't easily break through his shield's defense either. That's right, a 50-50 match." This explanation thrilled Frank. Captain America, Steve Rogers, was a household name throughout America. To be able to fight such a superhero to stand still was something Frank was naturally excited about. Good. Good. That's awesome. Frank waved the large bone in his hand excitedly, then asked, "Hey Rory, how's your relationship with that Wilson Fisk guy?" Rory looked at Frank suspiciously. "You know the answer already, so just spit it out." Perhaps Frank realized he was being a bit hypocritical, and awkwardly laughed. "I need weapons, preferably fully automatic heavy weapons." Rory's expression became even stranger. Unable to bear Rory's piercing gaze, Frank snapped, "Give me a straight answer, whether you'll help or not. Why are you looking at me like that?" Rory closed the refrigerated display case containing blood samples and serum, saying, "You're already a superhuman, yet you're still fighting like an ordinary person. What's the point of your enhancements?" Frank was stunned for a long time. "Oh, right. But I still want some weapons, at least so I won't get my clothes dirty when I kill people. Against ordinary people or special agents, firearms are obviously the most efficient." For the next 3 days, Frank stayed in the basement, recuperating peacefully. During those 3 days, Frank told Rory everything that had happened to him, including David, the former NSA analyst he had just met and who wanted to lie with him. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 28: The Punisher Troublemaker Frank. Bang! 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 Boom! Rory and Frank, who were sparring, clashed, their punches landing squarely. Frank, wincing in pain, clutched his stomach and yelled, "You freak!" Rory wasn't faring much better. He had a black eye, a cut on his lip drawing blood, and a punch to the kidney from Frank, causing him to clench his teeth in pain. Frank was experienced in combat, his fighting level roughly at the near master level, and he possessed superhuman physical enhancements. Rory's body was stronger than Frank's, and he also had Thanos' fighting instincts. But instinct is just instinct, it can't fully utilize the advantages of the body, so he and Frank were evenly matched. Frank leaned against the wall and sat down on the ground, looking at Rory and saying, "Your body is strong, but your fighting skills are too poor. You need to be more familiar with your body to utilize more of your advantages." This was easy to understand. For example, when a professional boxer throws a punch against an ordinary person, the ordinary person's after swing is very obvious. They only use their arm to build up power for the attack, and that momentary pause is a fatal weakness. Professional boxers, on the other hand, don't have a backward swing when they strike. In fact, their entire body, from legs to waist to shoulders, participates in the power-building process, resulting in greater power and speed. Rory possesses Thanos' fighting instincts but lacks excellent combat skills. According to Frank's observation, Rory can only utilize about a quarter of his physical abilities at their maximum. But that's the most hurtful part. Rory, only using a quarter of his strength, can fight him to draw. Frank's resolve almost crumbled. After catching his breath, he complained, "Rory, why didn't you enhance me to the same level as you? Giving you this body is a waste." Rory rested for a while, then went to the table and poured himself a glass of water. After taking a large gulp, he said, "Why would I do that? We're not related, and I've always been helping you, while you haven't offered me any help other than buying me some necessities." Frank shook his head, got up from the ground, and muttered, "The truth really hurts." After taking a shower and resting for a while, Frank picked up his coat and prepared to leave. At this moment, Rory called out, "Frank, bring David back and introduce him to me if you get the chance." Frank turned around and asked, "What do you want to do?" Through these few days of contact, Frank discovered that Rory, on the surface, was a scientist, but in reality, he was quite cunning, as could be seen from his attitude towards Wilson Fisk. He was using him while keeping an eye on him, and once Wilson Fisk was no longer of use, no one knew what Rory would do to him. Rory didn't even turn his head and said, "Didn't you say David was a computer genius? It's just making friends, why are you so nervous?" Frank left without giving Rory any reply. Several more days passed in a flash. During these days, Rory had been studying the enhanced blood samples of Wilson Fisk and Frank. The enhancement of these two individuals provided Rory with many new ideas, and with the data from these two experiments, Rory was more confident in his third gene enhancement. Since the Thanos gene in his body was not yet fully activated, and was currently in a fusion phase, if he wanted to fully grow into a powerhouse of Thanos' level, or completely transform into an Eternal, Rory had to take it one step at a time. Having completed the third-generation gene-enhancing serum, Rory habitually turned on the television to catch the news. The moment he turned it on, the screen showed the long-absent Playboy Tony Stark. "I am Iron Man." Rory shuddered at the sound of this. Sigh, too bad I can't be there to witness history, Rory thought with a slight regret. Unfortunately, Tony Stark lived on the West Coast. Knowing Tony's personality, the two might have become good friends. He turned off the television, washed up, and then lay back in bed, ready for a good night's sleep. Just as he closed his eyes, Rory was awakened by a rapid knocking at the door. "Frank?" Rory checked the security camera and saw that it was Frank knocking. Frank almost never came home at night because he knew Rory disliked his body odor. Besides, Rory had locked the basement door from the inside. Even if he had the key, he couldn't open it. Puzzled, Rory put on his bathrobe and went to open the door. The door slammed open, and Frank was seen waving at someone in the distance. A scruffy-looking man in a hoodie, carrying a travel bag, ran over. "What? Frank, what are you doing?" Frank pushed past Rory and said, "Didn't you say you wanted to see David? I brought him." David looked at Rory nervously, awkwardly raising his hand to greet him. "Hello, I'm David Lieberman, nice to meet you." Rory sized David up and down, asking, "How nice?" "Oh, just kidding." Rory patted David's shoulder, pointing to the travel bag in his arms, asking, "Brought luggage? Are you planning to stay here?" Frank then walked over, snatched the travel bag from David's arms, and heard a rattling metallic sound from inside, clearly not clothes or daily necessities. Frank and David then rummaged around several times, bringing in nearly 10 such travel bags in a large wooden crate. Curious, Rory opened one of them, and a dark, cold gun appeared before his eyes. "Holy crap, you robbed an arms dealer?" Frank hummed in agreement. To be precise, I robbed the NSA. Frank deftly took out a pile of guns, sorted them, and then inspected them one by one. David helped organize the ammunition, classifying different types and labeling them. At this moment, Rory regretted it. He regretted helping Frank, and even more so, he regretted enhancing Frank. This guy was a troublemaker. He would create trouble even if there wasn't one, and he would bring trouble to those around him. FK. Rory cursed under his breath, stepping forward and saying, Frank, you didn't lead the NSA agents here, did you? Frank didn't even turn his head, saying, the probability of them finding this place is almost zero. Boom. As soon as Frank finished speaking, the iron door leading from the basement to the outside couldn't withstand the force of the explosion and was blasted inside. Rory turned to look at Frank and winked. This is what you meant by almost zero? Click. A bullet was chambered, and Frank grabbed two fully automatic rifles and rushed to the basement level. David, terrified, hid behind the lab bench. Rory, shaking his head, pulled a box from under the bench and grumbled, Frank's a jinx, he brings trouble wherever he goes. Reaching the refrigerated cabinet, he quickly packed the blood samples into the box, then stuffed the laptop containing the serum data into his backpack, preparing to flee at any moment. Chapter 29 Some idiot blew my house up. Deafening boom echoed from the basement's first basement level. Rory and David, hiding around the stairwell, watched as her figure was sent flying backwards down the stairs to the second basement level, crashing into the wall with a thud, accompanied by a cloud of smoke. It was Frank, the man who had just charged up the stairs with his automatic rifle. FKU. Using an RPG in a residential area. Frank scrambled to his feet, dusted himself off, and was about to rush back when several round objects rolled down the stairs. Clang. 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 Boom. 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 The instant the grenades exploded, Rory grabbed David and dove to the other side. Rory reacted quickly enough, but still managed to get grazed by some shrapnel, while David was unharmed. Damn it. Frank, are you sure it's the NSA? Frank snapped, how should I know? He then pulled two smoke grenades from his waist and threw them forcefully down the stairs. Just a few days after moving in, their front door was demolished, grenades and RPGs, worse than a demolition crew. A surge of anger shot through him. Rory grabbed two pistols and followed Frank into the smoke. Unfamiliar with guns, he struggled with loading and safety, only firing when his face was practically touching the enemy. Bang! For Rory's physique, the recoil was barely noticeable. The opponent was wearing goggles and a gas mask, clearly not an agent. But Rory didn't have time to think about their identity. He pressed the pistols to their faces and fired two shots. An infrared beam swept towards Rory, but the young and daring Rory didn't retreat. Instead, he bent low and charged towards the source of the beam. Bang! He slammed his shoulder into the opponent, then straddled them and fired at point-blank range. PFFT, the gun was on the right, and a stream of bright red blood spurted from the left side of their head. Die, you bastard. After a few shots, the magazine was empty. Although he had killed another man, he had also revealed his position. Another infrared beam swept over, and Rory forcefully threw the empty pistol. Clang! The butt of the pistol hit the man squarely on the forehead, sending him tumbling. Frank's side was even faster. The gunfire was practically non-stop. As the smoke gradually dissipated, only Rory and Frank remained standing on the lower level of the basement. Frank gave Rory a thumbs up, then walked to the exit and peered out. Bang! A spark lit up the door frame, and Frank ducked back faster than a turtle. Sniper! There's another ambush outside. Frank leaned against the wall to avoid being spotted by the sniper. Rory picked up two enemy weapons and fiddled with them for a few moments before figuring out how to use them. This is a basement, there's no backup exit. Although he'd never used them before, he'd seen them on TV a lot. There were only a few buttons on the guns, so he could figure it out quickly with a few tries. Frank crouched down and searched the body of a dead team member, saying, they're not from the National Security Bureau, more like a contracted company. Contracted killing? Pretty much. Contracted companies usually focus on protection, occasionally doing overseas missions, but rarely domestically. Rory rolled his eyes. We're on a mission, damn it. After his initial complaint, Rory continued, do you have any ideas now? Although both Rory and Frank had undergone physical enhancements, they weren't strong enough to withstand bullets. Frank looked around. his eyes finally settling on the iron door lying on the ground after the explosion. Put on your bulletproof vests. We'll carry the iron door out together. Remember, stay close to the wall and follow my rhythm. Frank's plan was clear: get out of the basement and find a position with a good view and easy movement to counterattack. Rory also thought this was a good idea. No wonder Steve always carried a shield around. It was really convenient for defense. Clang clang, the iron door was carried out sideways with some difficulty and immediately came under fire from a sniper. Fortunately, the iron door was thick enough that ordinary bullets couldn't penetrate it. Follow me to the intersection. Frank went first, Rory followed behind, occasionally returning fire as they moved. Frank's marksmanship was okay, but Rory's was all about luck. Clang clang clang, the iron door sparked from the impact, clanging incessantly, but the weak impact posed no problem for the two of them. They quickly moved to the intersection, the iron gate fell to the ground, and Frank pointed to the tall building across the street, saying, "You hide here, I'll take care of the sniper on the roof." Without giving Rory time to react, he darted out. He weaved and hid behind a car, simultaneously taking out two members of the contractor team hiding behind another. Rory wasn't idle either, raising his submachine gun for faith firing, providing suppressive fire for Frank. Taking advantage of this opening, Frank had already quietly sneaked into the building across the street. "Anyone who destroys my lab will die." Out of ammo, Rory kicked open the door of the hardware store next door, slipping inside just before they threw a grenade. A loud boom followed, and the shop's windows shattered. Meanwhile, Frank had reached the rooftop on the other side of the street. In a one-on-one situation, the sniper was no match for Frank, taking over the sniping position and beginning to pick off the contractor team below. Thud thud, one shot, one kill. The contractor team reacted swiftly, immediately seeking cover to counterattack. They dodged Frank's attacks from the front, exposing their backs to Rory. Crash! A figure crashed through a second-floor window and leaped onto the street, a fire axe in hand. He cleaved it downwards with tremendous force, a splash of crimson blood filling the air. Rory's eagle-like eyes targeted the next target. Perhaps the fire axe's lethality was less than a fraction of a firearm, but its visual impact was 100 times greater. The oppressive feeling and the resulting fear were palpable to anyone. Roar! Rory leaped 2 meters high, clearing a car. The person hiding behind it turned to run, only to be cleaved in two by Rory's axe. Rory's sudden appearance disrupted the enemy's formation, allowing Frank on the rooftop to continue his roll call. In less than a minute, over a dozen corpses littered the street. Although Rory's anger gradually subsided, he was still very annoyed. All his hard work cultivating blood samples and serum, if he hadn't kept backups beforehand, wouldn't all his efforts have been for nothing? The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. The gunfire stopped, and David carefully carried Rory's suitcase out of the basement. PS1, a brief explanation of time travel. According to the setting, time travel requires 3 conditions. 1. A quantum realm time machine. 2. Pym Particles. 3. A time travel bracelet. Rory's several time travels all met these 3 conditions. However, Pym Particles are limited, so time travel cannot be done arbitrarily. I want to show you a different Marvel story. Finally, I want to thank everyone again for your support and love. Please vote. I want all your votes, recommendations, and monthly tickets. Likes, comments, and investments are all welcome. Even better if you give a reward. Chapter 30. Fear of insufficient firepower is not an onus. Rory returned to the basement, retrieved his phone, wiped the dust off, and called Wilson Fisk. Send someone over to handle the bodies, and also let the police know. Hell's Kitchen, after all, gunfights happen almost every day, nothing to be surprised about. Wilson Fisk had already bribed the police, delays or even no response wouldn't matter. A dozen minutes later, several vans sped over, loading the bodies, confiscating the weapons, and even cleaning up the bloodstains. "Hey, get someone to lock the door," Rory shouted. Wesley, who had come over, quickly called a repairman to fix the door. After everything was tidied up, half an hour passed before Wilson Fisk's men left. Frank said casually, "These people came for me. Consider it a debt I owe you. Luckily, your labs are all right." Rory retorted irritably, "All right? They came knocking on my door and you're telling me nothing's wrong?" Turning to David, he said, "Find them. I'm going to rip the gourd off their necks and soak it in formalin as a decoration." Rory gritted his teeth and released Frank, then added, "Frank, We'll settle the score later. Frank was largely responsible for what happened today. If it weren't for him, those people wouldn't have come to Rory's place. David then spoke up. To find out where these people came from, I need to go back to the safe house and use the network equipment there. Let's go together then. I'll go back and pack up first. Rory returned to the basement, collected all the experimental data and serum, and then drove with Frank to David's safe house. After faking his death, David had been hiding here secretly monitoring the outside world and his family. Rory put the combination lock into the only metal cabinet, then took the key from David and locked it. David, go find them, locate them immediately. Although he wasn't closely related to Rory, being bullied like this was unacceptable. He had to get revenge. Rory had endured humiliation to gain power, and now that he had the strength, there was no need to continue enduring it. David sat in front of the computer, typing furiously, saying between keystrokes, I've been investigating this for a while now, starting with Frank's operation. The orange agent was the mastermind, and then I found him. Frank's comrade, Garner, said that Bennett was a close confidant of the orange agent. Bennett must know the orange agent's location. I just need a little time to inject a tracking signal into his phone, and then we can locate the orange agent behind it. Rory raised his chin and said, no need for that. I don't believe anyone's mouth is harder than bone. No, that's not safe. David preferred to operate in secret because the risk of exposure was too high and would implicate his family. Rory gestured to Frank with his eyes, and Frank nodded, immediately noting down the address and outlining the battle plan. Rory then picked up David's phone from the workbench, dialed a number, and made a call. Beep 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 Kingpin, this is Rory. Send me a shipment of weapons. The address is... Rory didn't know the address and simply shoved the phone into David's hand. David hesitated, but finally, under Rory's gaze, gave the address. It wasn't the detailed address of the safe house, but rather a pickup address a kilometer away. After hanging up, Rory pointed to the computer and said, and what about the group that attacked today? What kind of contracting company? David entered the information into the computer and quickly found some relevant data. It's an overseas arms contracting company. People who can run overseas arms contracting companies either have military backgrounds or high-ranking government intelligence officials as their backers, but Rory didn't care. David had already determined Bennett's current location, and Frank was developing the battle plan based on Bennett's residence. This is where the role of a tactical mastermind became apparent. With a plan finalized, the three of them went together to the pickup location to collect the weapons delivered by Wilson Fisk. American gangs mostly sell Russian goods, and Kingpin, who took down the Russian mafia, had a huge stash of them. Two henchmen arrived with a car each. Without a word, they tossed a car and cargo to Frank and drove off in the other vehicle. Frank tested the goods. Although he didn't like Russian goods, it was the best he could manage. David, drive, let's go. In the car, Rory put on a bulletproof vest, then a tactical vest over it. A rifle, a pistol, a communications system, 5 spare magazines on the tactical vest, and extra grenades, smoke grenades, and flashbangs. It was like a small mobile arsenal. Frank couldn't help but complain, it's just arresting someone, is it really necessary? You don't understand. David drove to the outskirts of Bennett's residence and then piloted a drone to observe the enemy situation. After confirming everything was in order, he said to Rory and Frank in the back seat, there are 2 security guards at each of the front and back doors. The nearest police station is 2.1 kilometers away. We should be able to evacuate within 20 minutes. Understood. You wait in the car and be ready for my signal. After Rory and Frank got out of the car, Frank pointed to a grove of trees and said, I'll sneak over there. You wait at the corner of the stairs. Take care of the 2 security guards at the back door as soon as they come over. Rory didn't know if what was supposed to happen would change, but it was still necessary to be cautious. The 2 quietly approached the villa. Frank swiftly and cleanly took out the 2 security guards at the front door. Upon entering the villa, they heard strange noises coming from the 2nd floor as soon as they stepped onto the stairs. Such noises usually came from women, but this time it was a man's voice, and Rory couldn't help but shiver. Frank made a gesture, and Rory nodded, hiding at a corner of the stairs on the 2nd floor. Bang! Frank broke down the door. He's here. He's here. Then came a series of clanging sounds. Hearing the commotion, 2 security guards rushed in through the back door. Rory seized the opportunity, flashing forward and unleashing a barrage of fire down the stairs. Rat-a-tat-tat, The gun barrels spat muzzle flashes, gunshots mingled with screams, and two bloodied figures tumbled down the stairs. Yo-ho, shooting is satisfying, especially when you're running out of ammo. Rory changed magazines as he retreated to his previous position. Frank pushed the bound Bennett out of the room into the hallway. Bennett still had his small orange ball clenched in his mouth, a classic case of the ugly duckling chasing the pufferfish. Frank, 4 armed enemies are approaching you quickly, estimated to arrive in 30 seconds. A moment later, rapid footsteps echoed from downstairs. Frank glanced at his wristwatch. 13 minutes until evacuation time. Quick. Decisive action. Chapter 31, The puzzle is gone. Frank is depressed, and Rory is relieved. Frank threw Bennett against the wall, then jumped out of the second-floor window, preparing to ambush Rory from above and below. Clang. Rory pulled a pin on a grenade, and without hesitation, threw it down the stairs after hearing approaching footsteps. The 4 men who had entered had already noticed the 2 corpses on the stairs and immediately became more cautious. Thump. 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 The grenade bounced and rolled down to the first floor. Grenade. Rory yelled, lunging behind the sofa. A loud bang followed, leaving the room in a mess, but unfortunately, he hadn't killed anyone. Rat-a-tat-tat-tat-tat. Rory hooked the trigger and sprayed bullets down the stairs, single-handedly pinning down the 4 opposite him. At the same time, Frank, who had jumped out of the window, returned from the doorway, firing repeatedly and instantly killing 2 men. Rory continued firing as he descended, emptying his magazine just as he reached the first floor. Seeing that Rory was out of ammo, one of the men immediately tried to get up and fire back, but Rory didn't even bother to reload. He simply turned his gun around and leaped over. Bang! The wooden stock shattered instantly. 3 of the 4 men were taken care of. The last one was clearly startled by Rory. In that moment of hesitation, it was too late to raise his gun and fire. Rory kicked the sofa, and the force sent the man flying. He landed right at Frank's feet. Hello. Bang! Headshot. The last one to die had disbelief in his eyes. Frank suddenly felt that look was somewhat familiar. He reached out and lifted his mask, and Frank instantly took several steps back in shock. Billy. Oh shit. Don't thank me, let's go. Rory came over and shoved Frank. Coming to his senses, Frank immediately went upstairs and carried Bennett down to the first floor. Then he went straight to David, who was waiting by the roadside. Back in the car, Frank remained in a daze. David was driving when he narrowly missed an oncoming police car. Officers arrived at the scene immediately and, after identifying the deceased and the kidnapped individuals, transferred the case to the National Security Agency, NSA. NSA Senior Agent Madani nearly went crazy when she arrived. Among the dead was her new boyfriend, Billy Russell, and after her initial grief, she began to wonder why he was there. Madani knew Frank was responsible, but why would he kill his former comrade, Billy Russell? Unable to understand, Madani uploaded the case information to the database that very night. Simultaneously, the data was synchronized with SHIELD. The information was relayed up the chain of command, eventually reaching Maria Hill. After verification, Maria Hill took the compiled materials to Peggy Carter. Director Carter, this is the intelligence we just received. Traffic surveillance footage captured Rory, and a shootout occurred at a villa in the same area. The owner of the attacked villa is named Bennett, but no body was found at the scene, suggesting he may have been kidnapped. Analysis of the situation suggests there were at least 2 people, not just Rory, and they were using Russian-made weapons. Peggy Carter listened to Maria Hill's report while reviewing the materials. After a moment, she ordered, arrange for separate investigations, focusing on this Bennett and where those Russian-made weapons came from. These 2 questions were easy leads for S.H.I.E.L.D. to uncover. She believed they would have answers soon. Meanwhile, David drove Bennett to the outskirts. Frank had recovered from his daze, his face still gloomy, clearly burning with anger. He pulled Bennett out of the car and, without a word, punched him twice. He was about to deliver a 3rd punch when Rory stopped him. Frank, don't forget you're different from normal people. This punch will definitely kill him. Frank calmed down, snorted, and walked to the side. Rory squatted down, patted Bennett's chubby face, and said softly, wake up. If you're not dead, get up and answer 2 questions. If you tell me the answers, I'll let you go immediately. Bennett, with blood mixed with red at the corner of his mouth, struggled to lift his head and look at Rory. Rory smiled slightly. Tell me who's behind this, Is that guy called Agent Orange? Bennett was a pushover. He hesitated for only 2 seconds before confessing everything. Rollins, Agent Orange is Rollins. After returning home, he became a high-ranking CIA officer. Hearing this name, Frank understood everything. Rory nodded in satisfaction. Second question, do you like your father or your mother more? Bennett? Sorry, you hesitated. Bang! Rory pulled out a pistol and smashed Bennett's head open from both inside and out. Let's go find that guy named Rollins. He dared to bomb my lab. No matter how high-ranking he is, I'll have his ashes scattered. With Rory's addition, everything seemed much simpler. The group returned to the safe house, and Frank immediately asked David to look up information about Billy Russell. David hacked into the database and retrieved the data. Billy Russell runs a security company. Wait, he's involved in that overseas arms contractor too. Frank suddenly understood everything. It turned out that Billy Russell had been colluding with Agent Orange all along. No wonder Billy was at Bennett's house last night. He was after him. Rory walked over with a bowl of noodles, eating as he spoke. That guy came to kill you. Why are you being so sentimental? You don't have any masochistic tendencies, do you? Billy is my comrade, my friend. Rory curled his lip dismissively. If you only have friends like that, then you deserve to be played. He then turned to David and asked, have you found the Orange agent's whereabouts? Not yet. The whereabouts of CIA officials at the ministerial level and above are classified. I need some time. He slurped down a mouthful of noodles. Better hurry, I'm in a rush. Having worked all night, Rory felt instantly sleepy after his meal. He lay down on the only bed in the safe house and fell asleep immediately. He didn't know how much time had passed when he was vaguely shaken awake. Opening his eyes, he saw David and asked in confusion, did you find Agent Orange? I found some clues. Agent Orange, Rollins, has a safe house in the suburbs. I just hacked into the traffic surveillance and found that his convoy left the city an hour ago. Frank and I both believe he went to that safe house. Then what are we waiting for? Let's get going. Chapter 32. You are now surrounded by the two of us. David was still driving, while Frank sat silently in the back, organizing his equipment. The atmosphere was so heavy that even the car radio was barely audible. David's van stopped at an intersection, waiting for the last traffic light before leaving the city. Suddenly, Rory asked, David, have you thought about what you'll do after you return to normal life? David, his hands on the steering wheel, paused noticeably, then shook his head. I just want to reunite with my family as soon as possible. Watching his wife and children through surveillance cameras every day was a constant reminder, a form of torture for him. But if he didn't think about his family, David would only become more and more, is a difficult word to translate directly, but it implies a state of being listless, dispirited, and lacking motivation, which was his only reason for living. Frank felt the same way. Revenge was his greatest motivation. Rory's motivation stemmed from his obsession with biological experiments in becoming stronger. David, all your efforts are for a better life in the future. Your current efforts are to return to your family. Haven't you thought about what life will be like after you return? Like, what kind of job to find, what kind of gifts to buy for your family? David shook his head blankly, because he truly hadn't thought about it. He only fantasized about living happily with his family after returning home, never considering more practical issues. In America, being a good husband isn't easy. Rory glanced at Frank through the rearview mirror and said, actually, you could learn from Frank, living like a walking corpse. Nobody cares, and nobody cares about anyone else. No one will remember you when you die. Isn't that great? David smiled awkwardly, not responding. Frank looked up at Rory and sneered, mind your own business. Don't worry about me. Frank was always like this, never accepting kindness but readily accepting malice, then shooting the person in the back. Rory shook his head slightly. I really should have upgraded your IQ back then. Oh well, as long as you're happy. After all, paying too much IQ tax isn't easy. Frank took a moment to realize Rory was subtly implying he was brainless. Frank's marksmanship was a million times better than his words. After a long pause, he only managed to say, Rory, you're a real bastard. Thanks, at least what I have around my neck isn't just for show, and I won't be sad for someone who wants to kill me. David's van was parked 2 kilometers away from Rollins' safe house. The drone footage clearly showed the manor surrounded by guards and patrols with large dogs. Inside the van, the 3 men huddled together, staring at the small screen. Frank, What do you think we should do? Frank stroked his chin thoughtfully for a moment and said, the best way is for one person to draw fire from the front, while the other sneaks in from another direction. This was the most standard infiltration operation, but who would execute it was the problem. Frank was a tactical expert, he could draw fire, but he wanted to kill Rollins himself to avenge his family. Rory's ability to draw fire was questionable. At best, he could create an opportunity for Frank to infiltrate. If the enemy turned to reinforce, Frank would inevitably be caught in a fierce battle. David zoomed in on the satellite image on his computer, typed a few keystrokes, and several red dots immediately appeared on the screen. The nearest police station is 17 kilometers away, and there's a base 28 kilometers away. If it's police support, it will take at least 30 to 40 minutes from receiving the call to dispatch. If a helicopter is dispatched, it can arrive here in less than 5 minutes. This is troublesome. The orange agent is a high-ranking CIA official. If they encounter danger, the military will absolutely not stand idly by. Still too weak. If Rory had the Hulk's abilities, what plans could there be? He could just wipe them out. Rory turned to David. David, how about you draw their fire? David shook his head repeatedly, looking like he'd seen a ghost. Are you kidding me? I'm an intelligence analyst, I'm an office worker, I don't want to die. Frank sighed. I'll do it. I'll try to hold off as many people as possible. You take the explosives. As soon as Rollins is attacked, these guards will definitely rush back to support him. Then we'll use the explosives to send them all to their deaths. Frank took a backpack from a box in the back of the van, filled with TNT. He handed the detonator to David, instructing him, this is the detonator switch. I'll tell you to press it when you detonate. I object. Rory immediately objected. What if he gets nervous and accidentally presses it? I'll be done for. Frank and David thought Rory was joking. With weapons and ammunition in hand, Frank got out of the car first. Before getting out, Rory repeatedly warned him, I'm warning you, you are forbidden from touching the switch before receiving the detonation order. A few minutes later, Rory quietly crept to the grove of trees on the side of the manor. Beep ready in position. Roger. Frank's reply and the sound of gunfire rang out simultaneously, instantly killing a patrolling guard. In an instant, a piercing alarm blared throughout the manor. All the guards split into two groups, one returned to the villa, and the other counterattacked towards Frank's direction. Frank had intended for these men to pursue them, but they remained inside the manor. Plan changed. Rory, you support me from the flank. Take out the outer guards first. Roger. Rory raised his rifle and advanced. Random marksmanship was almost useless at this distance, he had to get closer. The gunfire from Frank's side continued. Rory, having reached the vicinity of the villa, opened fire with his rifle. Bang bang bang, there were about a dozen guards remaining on the outer perimeter. Rory emptied a magazine, taking down only two. The guards wouldn't foolishly stay put and let Rory shoot them, their movement created an opportunity for Frank to close in. Bang! Bang! Rat-a-tat-tat. Rory, hiding on the other side of the villa wall, pulled the pin on a grenade and threw it hard. Boom! Frank arrived and attacked from both sides, quickly wiping out the outer guards. Frank walked to the door and kicked it with a thud, but the door didn't budge. It's reinforced blast door. Give me the TNT. He attached the TNT to the door, adjusted the detonation signal, and shouted to David on the other end of the communicator, David, detonate. Boom. Dust flew, the ground shook, and after an explosion, a huge hole was blasted in the villa door. Frank tied the remaining TNT together and threw it into the hole. Detonate. Boom. Another loud bang. Frank rushed into the smoke-filled interior of the villa, Rory following closely behind. The battle ended 3 minutes later. Currently, only 3 people are alive in this villa, Rory, Frank, and Rollins. The CIA's head of classified operations, who is also inside the house. Chapter 33 Hawkeye Barton, who followed the scent, encounters Daredevil. Frank, I should have killed you too. Frank walked in with a grim face and demanded, why did you kill my family? Rollins shrugged and spread his hands, saying, it was just a business deal. Blame your bad luck. Time was running out, and Frank continued rambling on. Rory walked up to Rollins, who didn't recognize him, and asked suspiciously, you are? Thump. Rollins' brain didn't even register what was happening before he was sent flying and slammed into the wall behind him. PFFT. A mouthful of blood gushed from his mouth, dripping down his chin onto his expensive shirt and suit. Rory lowered his kick and slowly walked over. "You blew up my door, huh?" Thump. "You arranged for the contractor to kill you, huh?" Thump. "You think you're so great, huh?" Thump. After being repeatedly struck with the butt of a gun, Rollins was instantly unrecognizable. His nose was sunken, his mouth cracked, his teeth were knocked out, his face was covered in blood, and even his chin was deformed from being punched. I don't know you. I'll let you know today." Frank walked over, and together with Rory, they reloaded their guns and pulled the triggers of 2 fully automatic pistols at Rollins. 2 magazines of 60 rounds of ammunition were used, and Rollins, leaning against the wall, was riddled with bullets. Even a professional corpse collector would shake his head at the sight. "Director Carter, this is the latest news. Bennett had close ties with Rollins, the head of the CIA's Secret Operations Department. 30 minutes ago, Rollins died in a safe house in the suburbs, along with 21 others, all of whom perished." "Are you sure it was Rory who did it?" Peggy Carter asked. "Bennett's body has just been found. There were footprints from at least 2 people at the scene. Intelligence believes it's related to a man named Frank, and we can't rule out the possibility that Rory was working with Frank." Peggy Carter tapped her pen a few times on her desk, pondered for a moment, and then said, "Have Clint investigate. Find out why our Rory did this, and what his relationship is with this Frank guy." "Yes, Mom. Also, tell Clint that if he finds any trace of Rory, he shouldn't act on his own. He should report to me immediately." Clint Barton, codenamed Hawkeye and nicknamed Coy, is a sniper who uses a bow and arrow. He is proficient in shooting and geometry, and his arrows are almost always accurate. Upon receiving the order, Hawkeye Barton immediately took action. First, he went to check the crime scenes of Bennett and Rollins, and then he went to the apartment where Rory first appeared. The investigation revealed that the apartment was not rented in Rory's name, but by a real estate agency. Behind the agency was another construction company. Coincidentally, the basement where the shootout in Hell's Kitchen happened not long ago also belonged to this company. That night, Barton infiltrated the company, hoping to find more useful clues. He pried open a drawer, revealing it filled with various documents, and immediately began searching by label. Suddenly, he stopped. Someone had appeared not far behind him. "Sir, stealing isn't a good habit," said a man in a red bodysuit with a double D embroidered on the chest, wearing a mask that obscured his face. Barton stood up and said, "If you can't show your face, what kind of good person are you?" Barton assumed he was an employee and decided to subdue him first. He grabbed a pen from the desk and threw it. Whoosh! It was fast. But the man easily dodged it, embedding it firmly in the wall behind him. The man in the red bodysuit wasn't one to be trifled with, and the two instantly engaged in combat. Bang! 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 The office was smashed to pieces. In a physical exchange, neither Barton nor the man in the red bodysuit gained the upper hand. They traded blows, each quickly exhausting their stamina. After another exchange, they both stopped simultaneously. Barton, breathing heavily, said, obstructing the investigation, "You're in trouble, you know that?" "How should I know if you're telling the truth?" Barton casually pulled out an ID and tossed it over, which the man caught precisely. SHIELD agents always gave themselves identification when on missions, but unfortunately, the man was blind and couldn't see it. However, he could feel the badge on the ID. After confirming the man's identity, he returned the ID to Barton, lowered his guard, and said softly, "Excuse me, I thought you wanted to destroy the evidence here. And who are you?" After a long silence, the man spoke, "You can call me Daredevil. I'm investigating a murder case that happens to be related to this company. It seemed many clues were connected to this company. This company is controlled by a gang, and the gang leader is a man named Kingpin. Through my investigation, I've discovered that Kingpin's real name is Wilson Fisk, and he controls 70% of New York's gray market." Barton frowned slightly. His purpose in coming here was to investigate Rory, but he hadn't expected to uncover such a large gang. "Does this include arms dealing?" Barton seemed to have thought of something and asked about the intelligence. Daredevil nodded, "Of course. Kingpin recently absorbed the Russian gang. Aside from some small, independent gangs, he sells almost all the weapons on New York's black market." This all made sense. Kingpin helped Rory rent an apartment to use as a laboratory and also provided him with weapons. Could Kingpin be Rory's big boss? Wilson Fisk had been very irritable lately. A self-proclaimed gentleman, he rarely lost control of his emotions. But today, he had indeed lost control. Just because a small matter wasn't handled properly, he smashed a henchman's head. The old Wilson Fisk would never have done this. Even Wesley, standing nearby, had a hint of fear in his eyes. To him, Wilson Fisk seemed like a completely different person. Perhaps only Vanessa could bring Wilson Fisk stability at this moment. Fortunately, they had a date that evening. "Boss, you need to change into clean clothes. Ms. Vanessa is waiting for you, and I don't think she wants you to go with the smell of blood on your face." Hearing Vanessa's name, Wilson Fisk immediately calmed down. He took out a handkerchief to wipe his hands, then threw it on the corpse and coldly said, "Clean up the body. Also, find that daredevil guy immediately. I want to break his neck myself." "Yes, sir." At this moment, Wilson Fisk was like a tyrant. Wilson Fisk, on his way to the date, was unaware that he was being watched. He went back, took a shower, changed into clean clothes, and went to the restaurant where he was meeting Vanessa. Vanessa was like a panacea. After the date, Wilson Fisk returned to his normal self. As they walked out of the restaurant, ready to take Vanessa home, Wilson Fisk suddenly stopped, turning his head to glance dangerously at the rooftop in the distance. It was pitch black and empty, but Wilson Fisk knew someone was watching him. "Wilson, what's wrong?" Vanessa, already in the car, called out softly, puzzled, seeing Wilson Fisk hadn't gotten in yet. Wilson Fisk maintained his smile, saying, "I'm sorry, darling, something came up that I need to take care of. I'll arrange for a driver to take you home. If there's time, I'd like to have a drink with you later." Although she didn't say it explicitly, Vanessa had implicitly agreed to spend the night with Wilson Fisk during their meal. She was quite surprised that Wilson Fisk would change his mind at the last minute. Chapter 34, Frontline tanks are invincible, damage dealers are trash. Seeing Vanessa remain silent, Wilson Fisk immediately assured her, "Darling, go home and wait for me. I'll come find you in an hour." Vanessa knew Wilson Fisk was a mob boss, but she believed he was different from those ruthless gangsters. Besides, Wilson Fisk was incredibly good to her, his deep affection was impossible to hide. As an intelligent woman, Vanessa accepted this pure love without reservation while remaining rational. "Be careful," Vanessa could only urge him on. "I will." After a tender farewell, Wilson Fisk patted the car roof, signaling the driver to start. He watched the luxury car disappear around the corner before leading his entourage towards a nearby alley, adjusting his white suit as he walked. Snap Daredevil stood at the deepest part of the dimly lit alley. Wilson Fisk approached and said calmly, "I've been looking everywhere for you. I didn't expect you to dare show your face in front of me. Kingpin, I will definitely put you in jail." Daredevil muttered, then combined two short sticks into one long stick, and the next second it became nunchucks. Watching Daredevil's flashy moves, Wilson Fisk smiled coldly, and with a couple of taps of his fingers, several of his henchmen immediately rushed towards Daredevil. Thud! The moment the two clashed, an arrow that seemed to appear out of nowhere suddenly pierced the shoulder of one of his henchmen. Then another arrow pierced the calf of another. The master-level fighter Daredevil wielded his stick in a blur of motion, knocking the remaining men to the ground. He pointed his stick at Wilson Fisk, his provocation palpable. Facing the super-powerful Daredevil and an archer hidden somewhere, Wilson Fisk showed no fear. Instead, a wicked smile appeared on his lips. Boom! Wilson Wesker's fist carved a deep crater in the wall. A startled Daredevil immediately dodged backward, simultaneously swinging his long staff. Just as the staff was about to strike Wilson Wesker, it suddenly snapped in half, a thin thread connecting the two ends, narrowly avoiding Wilson Wesker's parrying arm. Snap! The other end, now a nunchaku, struck Wilson Wesker, causing no real damage. "Daredevil, tonight is your death night." Daredevil barely dodged another punch, retracting the nunchaku back into a single staff. Thud! Thud! Another arrow flew from the darkness, striking Wilson Wesker squarely. The arrow had only penetrated half a centimeter, not even breaking through the muscle layer. Wilson Wesker glanced at it, casually brushed the arrow off his arm, and then attacked Daredevil again. "You think calling in a henchman will defeat me? You're far from it." Hawkeye Barton muttered to himself from the rooftop. "Damn it, is this guy even human?" 3 minutes later, Daredevil was struggling to fend off Wilson Fisk's attacks. Each punch he took left him in excruciating pain. At this rate, he'd be dead sooner or later. Hawkeye Barton's arrows were ineffective, only providing minimal disruption. Boom! The wounded Daredevil, caught off guard, was caught off guard by Wilson Fisk, who embedded himself in the wall. Just as he was about to throw another punch, another arrow flew towards him. This arrow was slightly different, the arrowhead was a little larger, and it even flashed a small red light. Beep beep beep, the arrow exploded near Wilson Fisk. Boom. The explosion sent Wilson Fisk flying, his clean white suit now tattered. When he stood up again, Daredevil was nowhere to be seen in the alley. HMPH. Daredevil. I'll kill you sooner or later. A frontline warrior and a marksman couldn't defeat a tank, and were even nearly killed in the process. Wilson Fisk hadn't forgotten his promise to Vanessa. He went home, took a shower, changed his clothes, and on his way to Vanessa's house, he took out his phone and dialed a number. Lori, I'm being watched. I need to strengthen my body again. At this moment, Lori was enjoying dinner, celebrating Frank's revenge. But this guy didn't feel relieved or liberated because of revenge. Instead, he felt even more empty because he had lost his target. Frank stared at the wallet in his hand. The basement was dimly lit, as if he couldn't see the figures in the family photo. A flame had ignited in his heart because of revenge, but now the flame had died down, leaving only darkness. At this moment, Frank seemed to have merged with the rusty pipes and moldy walls around him. Lori didn't disturb Frank, who was missing his family, but turned to talk to David. David, now that everything's resolved, have you thought about what's to come? They'd discussed this before, and David had considered it. Life seemed to be a never-ending series of problems, which was truly a headache. David picked up his glass, took a sip, and shook his head. I have ample evidence now, and the culprit has been brought to justice. I just need to hand the evidence over to Madani of the NSA, and I should be released from criminal status soon. And then? After that, I can't go back to the NSA. I'll just find any job for now. I can't let Sarah support the family alone. Sarah was David's wife, she still didn't know David was still alive. Rui opened a can of beer. This level of alcohol was practically a beverage to him now. He gulped down half the can, wiped his mouth, and suddenly asked, David, how about working for me from now on? Working for you? David's expression froze. You don't need to do anything else, just help me look up information or monitor some movements. That way you can stay home and spend more time with your family, and still have a decent income. David replied almost without hesitation, if that's all, that's great. As long as the salary is enough to support my family, I think I can definitely handle the job. The agreement was reached, and Rory and David clinked glasses. Just as they put down their drinks, the phone rang. Rory took out his phone and saw it was Wilson Fisk calling. He gave David a look, then walked a short distance away to answer the call. Rory, I'm being watched. I need to enhance my body again. Who's watching you? Rory asked curiously. Wilson Fisk was the emperor of the New York underworld. He had even bribed the police and council members, and packaged himself as a philanthropic businessman. Normally, no one would investigate him. Wilson Fisk briefly recounted the attack he had just suffered. Hearing his description, Rory immediately guessed that the two men were Daredevil and Hawkeye Barton. How did these two get involved, and it's aimed at Kingpin? Rory couldn't help but wonder. Daredevil is a vigilante, Hawkeye Barton is an SHIELD agent, so there's only one truth. It's aimed at him. If Kingpin is captured, the next target will definitely be him. The third gene enhancement is imminent, and after thinking for a moment, Rory had a plan in mind. Come see me tomorrow morning. No problem. Seeing Rory agree, Wilson Fisk on the other end secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He had spent so much money and resources, his real purpose was to obtain the enhancement serum. Especially after experiencing that invincible power, Wilson Fisk was very fascinated by it. After hanging up the phone, Frank's voice came from behind Rory. He's a wicked underworld godfather who has done all sorts of bad things. Why are you helping him? If you ask me, you should kill him. After his family was destroyed and he turned to the dark side, Uncle Punishment's mind was full of killing, killing, killing. Now that he had avenged his family, he seemed to have no interest in anything else, except for killing. Of course, he wasn't a serial killer, he didn't have a morbid lust for killing. He simply believed that bad people deserved to die. Rory chuckled and asked, Wilson Fisk is a bad guy, that's true. He's bad because he circumvents the law to gain power and profit. What about you? Frank snorted, I disregard the law. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, It means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 35. A loud crash from the roof, and Iron Man Tony Stark makes his grand entrance. Everyone has a reason to exist, and only a living Wilson Fisk can bring more benefits to Rory. For example, investing in the lab, purchasing raw materials, providing cover, and so on. Rory has no intention of punishing evil and promoting good, because speaking of kindness in a decadent country is an extremely foolish act. Are gang members bad? Very bad, but only superficially so. The root cause of all this is actually those higher-ranking politicians, those who amass wealth through profit. For the lower classes, only survival matters. If Wilson Fisk is a tyrant, Daredevil is a Confucian, but not a proper Confucian, but the kind of corrupt Confucian who wants to reform everyone. Frank can be seen as a legalist, or the most ruthless of legalists, where mistakes are punishable by death, eliminating a small group to intimidate the majority, and there's no going back. The next day, Wilson Fisk, having spent a tender night with Vanessa, got up early. Vanessa pulled the blanket over her chest, her eyes fixed on Wilson Fisk, who was getting dressed. She didn't ask where he was going, but simply said with concern, "Would you like to have breakfast together before you go?" Wilson Fisk buttoned his cuffs, turned back, and smiled. "I've made a reservation at George's restaurant tonight. Would the beautiful Miss Vanessa be willing to have dinner with me?" "Of course, I can't wait." Vanessa smiled gently. Wilson Fisk walked to the bedside, kissed Vanessa on the forehead, and left the apartment. His luxury car was already parked on the side of the road. He got in and drove straight to Brooklyn. Upon arriving at the agreed-upon location, he sent a text message to Rory. A few minutes later, Rory, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, got into the car. A vial of serum was handed to Wilson Fisk. "This is the serum you requested. A Secret Service has been looking for me lately, so it's best not to show my face. The operating procedure has been sent to your phone." Wilson Fisk nodded, carefully taking the serum and placing it in the storage box. "Thank you, Rory, you're my best friend." Of course, friends should help each other. Rory seemed to have something else in mind. Wilson Fisk didn't think much of it and, after parting ways, drove straight to the factory in the suburbs with his driver. As soon as they entered the factory, their activity was detected by the surveillance equipment installed by SHIELD, and a monitoring department in the Tri-Wing building immediately issued an alarm. The SHIELD agent in charge of monitoring immediately reported the news to his superiors, Commander Hill. "Someone just entered that factory." Maria Hill immediately rushed to Peggy Carter's office with a tablet. "Director Carter, please take a look at this." At this moment, the screen on the tablet showed Wilson Fisk activating the control panel. Peggy Carter frowned. "Not Rory?" Seeing Wilson Fisk walk towards the control panel, Peggy Carter immediately ordered, "Notify Steve and Tony to move out immediately." "Yes, Mom." Back at the factory, Wilson Fisk had already taken off his clothes and entered the energy conversion chamber. After placing the serum into the slot, he instructed the driver, "Go push the switch over there. Stop as soon as it reaches 200, understand?" "Yes, boss." Wilson Fisk took a deep breath. "Let's begin." The driver pushed the switch, and a buzzing sound immediately came from inside the machine. The indicator lights on the workbench flashed incessantly. And as the power increased, numerous electric arcs appeared inside the energy conversion chamber. Sizzle sizzle, the flashes of electricity startled the driver, causing him to back away repeatedly. Ugh! Although Wilson Fisk had experienced an enhancement once, he still felt pain, though not as much as before, still within a tolerable range. Just as the machine reached its peak power, a hole was suddenly punched in the factory roof. Boom! Thud! A striking red and gold-plated suit of armor appeared, one knee on the ground, a fist clenched and pressed against the earth, a classic superhero entrance. Immediately afterward, the roar of engines filled the air as a SHIELD Quinjet landed, followed by Captain America and a group of SHIELD agents entering the factory. Wilson Fisk's driver instantly drew his pistol. Clang! A circular shield struck the driver in the back, knocking him to the ground. "Lie still." Tony Stark, Iron Man, strode up to the driver with metallic steps. The driver yelled, "I need to see a lawyer." Tony, ignoring any talk of lawyers, replied haphazardly, "Who's that in there?" Just then, the energy pod, Its lights dimmed, slowly opened, and a large foot stepped out. Wilson Fisk seemed even stronger. His clenched fist cracked. This is power. Wilson Fisk felt an explosive surge of power coursing through his body. Sir, please raise your hands. We suspect you're researching biological weapons. Thank you for your cooperation. This was Tony Stark's first mission as a SHIELD consultant, and he wasn't yet very familiar with the official terminology. Wilson Fisk then noticed the increased number of people in the factory, a red and gold Iron Man, and Captain America in a blue bodysuit holding a shield. Who are you? Wilson Fisk asked calmly. Homeland Strategic Defense, Attack and Logistics Agency, or SHIELD for short. We hope you'll cooperate with our investigation. Wilson Fisk was stunned for a moment, then erupted in fury. You're here to arrest me? His expression instantly turned ferocious as he grabbed the energy conversion pod beside him and threw it at Iron Man Tony Stark. Boom! The energy conversion pod moved incredibly fast. Tony hadn't expected them to act so suddenly, and by the time he reacted, it was too late. He was immediately stuffed into the energy pod and embedded in the wall nearby. Bang! 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 As soon as Wilson Fisk made his move, the agents immediately opened fire. Wilson Fisk instinctively turned to protect his face, and a few seconds later, a cascade of bullets fell to the ground. The bullets couldn't penetrate Wilson Fisk's body. This was something even Captain America, Steve Rogers, couldn't do. Ha 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 ha. Seeing he was unharmed, Wilson Fisk let out a wild, arrogant laugh. Although the serum Wilson Fisk used originated from Captain America, the difference between Steve and Wilson Fisk before the serum enhancement was like night and day. It was like the foundation of a house. The stronger the foundation, the taller the building. Before the enhancement, Steve was a skinny recruit who couldn't even complete a 2-kilometer run, while Wilson Fisk was a burly man nearing the limits of human endurance. In this respect, Steve was at a disadvantage from the start. Secondly, this was Wilson Fisk's second enhancement, so the effect would definitely be better than the first. Captain America, Steve, charged forward and slammed his fist into Wilson Fisk's face. Slap, like a slap in the face, not very damaging, but very humiliating. Wilson Fisk retaliated with a punch. Clang. It was blocked by the shield. Wilson Fisk continued his attack. Steve maintained his defense. After several rounds, Steve couldn't inflict any effective damage on Wilson Fisk, and Wilson Fisk couldn't break through Steve's defenses. Suddenly, the energy conversion pod embedded in the wall exploded, and Iron Man Tony, freed, accelerated towards Wilson Fisk. P.S. I'm begging for some readership data. Reading means finishing the last page of the latest chapter. This is really important to me during the recommendation period. The survival of this book depends on you, my dear readers. Thank you. Chapter 36 Kingpin vs. Captain America and Iron Man, 3 rounds. Under the powerful kinetic energy of the Mark III, Wilson Fisk was thrown more than 10 meters, crashing through a factory's load-bearing pillar along the way. You're incredibly rude, and you shouldn't have locked me in that metal box. Tony then fired another energy blast, sending Wilson Fisk, who was trying to get up, tumbling over. The intense heat burned Wilson Fisk's arm red. After all, he was only human. Withstanding a pistol bullet was Wilson Fisk's limit, and exceeding the bullet's energy limit would still cause injury. But Wilson Fisk wasn't going to give up. He got up and charged at Iron Man Tony like a tank. Clang. Captain America, Steve Rogers, stood in front of Tony, blocking Wilson Fisk's full-force attack, while Tony flew above Wilson Fisk's head to provide support. This was Steve and Tony's first time working together, and there was absolutely no coordination. Their mutual interference only allowed Wilson Fisk to hold on for a few more minutes. But that was all. In the end, Wilson Fisk was subdued by the two of them and taken back to SHIELD headquarters. Peggy Carter, Captain America, Tony Stark, and Hawkeye Barton, who had just returned, arrived together at the place where Wilson Fisk was being held. Behind the super-strong tempered glass, Wilson Fisk was wearing very heavy alloy shackles on his hands and feet. A click sounded as the electronic door opened, and the group entered one after another. Captain America, Steve Rogers, eagerly asked, "Where's Rory?" Wilson Fisk raised an eyebrow and asked, "Will you let me go if I tell you?" "Of course not. You locked me in this iron box, and I'll lock you up here too." The petty Tony was quite vengeful. Wilson Fisk sneered, "Why would I tell Rory if I offended him and didn't get anything in return?" That made sense. Having offended Rory and received no benefit, Wilson Fisk couldn't think of a reason to betray him. Peggy Carter spoke up. What do you want? I want the power of pardon, and I want you to help me become the mayor of New York City. If you agree to these 2 conditions, I'll immediately tell you where Rory is. Wilson Fisk was disloyal to everyone. Although Rory helped him gain greater power, he felt no gratitude towards Rory. He even considered using the enhanced power to capture Rory, imprison him, and create more super soldiers for him. Tony scoffed. Bad guys get these privileges? It's tempting. Steve glanced at Tony. He had no good impression of this playboy. If it weren't for Peggy's orders, he wouldn't even want to cooperate with such a person. Hawkeye Barton then said, Ms. Carter, I've investigated some things. Both of Rory's labs were funded by this man, including those Russian-made weapons, and his gang is involved in violent crimes. You think arresting me will make New York safer? That's laughable. Steve and Tony didn't understand Wilson Fisk's meaning because they couldn't comprehend the living conditions of the lower classes. The gangs now operate almost entirely under Wilson Fisk's control, essentially creating a new set of rules outside the existing ones, Kingpin's Underworld Survival Code. Once Wilson Fisk is gone, these controlled gangs will unleash their fury like wild horses, perhaps even more rampant than before. There's a saying that's very true. The best way to control a demon is to let a stronger demon lead it. Order resists chaos, but order must be found within chaos. After a long silence, Peggy Carter said, I can grant you a pardon, but I won't help you become mayor of New York City. If you truly have the ability, you can run for mayor yourself. The only thing I can guarantee is that I won't stop you. Deal. Wilson Fisk suspected that Rory had betrayed him, which was why he agreed so readily. After obtaining Rory's approximate location, Peggy Carter immediately organized her men to prepare for departure. Tony, you go with the others. Don't act alone. Maria Hill approached them as soon as they left the place where Wilson Fisk was being held. Director Carter, something's happened. What happened? Maria Hill reported, 10 minutes ago, Midtown Manhattan experienced a near-total power outage. According to power monitoring, all electrical energy is converging towards the docks in Hell's Kitchen. Peggy Carter suddenly realized something. Oh no. We've fallen for their trap. It wasn't just S.H.I.E.L.D. that installed surveillance in the suburban factory, Rhodes had installed it too. He had witnessed the entire battle between Wilson Fisk and the superheroes. Get out of here. Peggy Carter had a very bad feeling. The widespread power outage must be because Rhodes needed more power. And the fact that Wilson Fisk was deliberately released to distract S.H.I.E.L.D. meant that Rhodes was prepared for a showdown, and this battle would likely be very difficult. Peggy Carter was right. This would be the final stage of Rhodes' genetic enhancement. Wilson Fisk was a decoy he deliberately released to distract S.H.I.E.L.D., precisely to avoid being interfered with by S.H.I.E.L.D. Rewind 10 minutes. This energy conversion chamber was different from previous ones. It was a hibernation pod-like device, with 8 arm-thick cables connecting to a control console, the other end of which connected to several transformers, drawing power directly from the city's main power lines. Once the machine started, Rory felt as if he were engulfed in blue plasma, experiencing excruciating pain that burned his soul. Torture like hell. He was torn between life and death. Sizzle crack sparks flew from the arm-thick cables, and the blue plasma in the energy chamber transformed into a blue halo that spread outwards until it disappeared. Click. Rory pushed open the energy chamber and stood up naked, carefully sensing the changes in every cell of his body. This was the first time Rory had directly felt power. Although he had 2 previous enhancement experiences, those only made him feel stronger. But this time was different. After the 3rd stage of gene enhancement, he possessed a sense of control over his power. Clenching his fist, Rory felt that his current power was infinitely close to that of the original Thanos, theoretically, of course. Thanos' power wasn't just physical strength, he also possessed virtually indestructible skin and resistance to various energies, making him impervious to disease and aging. Furthermore, Thanos possessed unparalleled mental strength and knowledge. Rhodes emerged from the energy pod, dressed, and, feeling the pent-up energy within him, chuckled, "How, SHIELD? Old popsicle? Come on, it's time to settle old scores." Rhodes waited at the dock for SHIELD and Steve's arrival. But instead of SHIELD, it was someone he never expected. Chapter 37, So, if the world could be destroyed, you have to destroy me first? Tony disobeyed Peggy Carter's orders to follow the main force and instead flew ahead to Hell's Kitchen docks alone, wearing the Mark II suit. Whoosh clang, the Mark suit landed safely, but there was no sign of Rhodes, only some cold, impersonal machines. Rhodes had been there just a minute ago, ready to fight SHIELD, but as he waited, the world before him suddenly underwent a dramatic transformation. The earth warped and folded, countless clones of the same building appeared, as if copied and pasted. Above him was no longer blue sky and white clouds, but the reflection of the city. Beneath his feet was no longer earth, but a disk floating above a bottomless abyss, a kaleidoscope of illusions. The surrounding buildings disassembled and reassembled, completely transforming into a world Rhodes didn't recognize. A mirror world? Rhodes immediately recognized it as the work of the Sorcerer Supreme. "Rhodes, who are you?" a voice sounded from behind Rhodes. Turning around, the hood of a yellow sorcerer's robe concealed the Ancient One's bald head. Standing straight a short distance away, hands behind her back, she stared at Rory with a questioning look in her eyes. Rory said calmly, "You've already called me by name, so why ask who I am? I know your name, but I don't know who you are." The Ancient One's voice was like an ancient whisper, bringing peace to those who heard it, and Rory was no exception. As the strongest known being on Earth, the holder of the Time Stone and the guardian of the world, the Ancient One was invincible with the power of the Time Stone and the Dark Dimension. Logically, the Sorcerer Supreme, the Ancient One, would never participate in worldly conflicts. She would only protect Earth from invasion by other dimensions. Unexpectedly, she appeared here and even captured Rory. The Ancient One walked over and circled Rory twice, saying calmly, "You're not from this world. Where did you come from?" Rory's heart skipped a beat, but he maintained a composed expression, saying, "I came from 1970. First, I went to 2023 with Steve and Tony, then returned to 1970 and came to the present." The Ancient One frowned, and after a moment, she formed a hand seal. The eye of Agamotto on her chest slowly opened, emitting a green light. Looking at the Ancient One with her eyes closed, Rory's fingers twitched. He desperately wanted to seize the Time Stone, but he lacked the confidence to defeat the Sorcerer Supreme. Being trapped in the mirror dimension would be disastrous. Seeing it but not being able to have it was incredibly tempting. Several afterimages appeared around the Ancient One, seemingly undergoing time travel, before returning to stillness after a few breaths. "I saw your past and future, but you suddenly appeared in 1970. Can you tell me about your past?" "No, because I don't know how I appeared in 1970, so I'm sorry." Rory refused the offer without even thinking. The Ancient One smiled slightly. "It seems you have a secret, but it's okay. Someone will come to pick you up later. At least you can no longer cause any harm to my world." "What do you mean?" Rory frowned slightly. The Ancient One smiled and said, "Strange just contacted me. He told me that you were originally from his world and were very dangerous, so he plans to take you back and lock you up to prevent you from causing irreparable harm to more worlds." Rory panicked and quickly said, "Why are you doing this?" The Ancient One shook her head. "Because you created a new timeline. Although this kind of thing is not under my jurisdiction, I have some responsibility." "Are you kidding me? What does this have to do with me?" Rory didn't understand what the Ancient One was talking about, but he definitely didn't want to go back to 2023. At the time when the Avengers were at their most powerful, Thanos was turned to dust. What? He has an extra 6. With a casual flick of her wrist, countless green threads suddenly appeared within the mirror space, each thread adorned with a few bright spots, some as few as 1 or 2, others as many as a dozen. The Ancient One manipulated one of them, saying, "You've traveled through time, you should understand the principles of timelines." "Not really," Rory replied. "I only know that the past cannot influence the future, and the present future could also be the past." He hadn't studied this topic, only discussing it casually. But what did this have to do with him? The Ancient One explained, "Each timeline here has bright spots, each representing a person, and also the anchor point of that timeline. As long as the anchor point remains, the timeline won't have problems." The Ancient One glanced at Rory and asked, continuing, "Do you know what the consequences would be if the anchor point were to fail?" Rory shook his head. "This world would disappear, like a lifeless tree silently awaiting death, and everyone, including you and me, would vanish." Then, the Ancient One waved her hand, leaving only a green timeline in front of them. She continued, "Starting in 1970, Your appearance caused the anchor point to change. Peggy Carter, who should have been aging and dying, became the new anchor point. A branch of the timeline appeared, and the Ancient One pointed to it, saying, "This is our current timeline, a timeline that shouldn't have existed." Rory was confused. "I caused Peggy Carter's situation?" The Ancient One nodded. "Do you remember the white mouse from the last experiment? You didn't take it with you when you left, and Peggy Carter happened to find it and bite it. Do you understand now?" Rory suddenly realized. No wonder Peggy Carter remained young after all these years, she had mutated. Rory shook his head. "Even if it's related to me, I live here now. Why did you have Strange take me away?" The Ancient One sighed. "Rory, I see your future. You will kill everyone here, Steve Rogers, Clint Barton, even Strange, who's still undergoing surgery a few blocks away. You will kill all the Avengers, even me. Your future self is too terrifying, so you can't stay here. The Sorcerer Supreme from another timeline, Strange, will handle your affairs." Rory's expression grew cold. He had indeed considered killing Steve Rogers, but he hadn't considered killing anyone else. Perhaps some other unforeseen circumstances had occurred. But this wasn't the Ancient One's reason for controlling his fate. Afraid of the world's destruction, so she wanted to destroy him first? Rory's cold eyes stared at the Ancient One, and he calmly asked, "What if I say no?" The Ancient One saw in Rory's eyes as if she saw the future Rory. She became even more resolute, saying, "It's useless. Don't struggle. I want to try. P.S. Thank you to Reader for the 100-point reward. Thank you to Reader for the 100-point reward. Thank you to Reader 20240517013138992 for the 200-point reward. And thank you to all the brothers for the recommendation tickets and monthly tickets. Please continue reading during the recommendation period. Brothers, help me." Chapter 38 I will bring war and destruction. Roar. Rory was incredibly fast, arriving before the Ancient One in the blink of an eye. The Ancient One drew a circle with both hands, creating a runic shield. Whoosh! The shield shattered the moment Rory's fist made contact. The Ancient One's eyes widened in shock. She had thought the future Rory was terrifying enough, but she hadn't expected the current Rory to be this powerful. Rory's fist extended, his fingers forming a claw, aiming straight for the Eye of Agamotto on the Ancient One's chest. The Ancient One reacted quickly, a bright orange runic whip appearing in her right hand, lashing out at Rory. Snap! Rory staggered from the blow, regaining his footing before attacking again. But the Ancient One could fly. He flew backwards towards a rooftop, separated by a chasm tens of meters deep. Rory, filled with rage, took a frantic running start, leaped to the edge, and hurtled towards the Ancient One's location like a cannonball. The Ancient One immediately created a portal and disappeared inside. With a deafening crash, Rory's impact slammed into the building where the Ancient One had just been standing, then he followed her into the portal a split second before it closed. "Don't run." The Ancient One's power was firmly at the level of the Heavenly Father. She also drew dark energy from the dark dimension. But Rory was no weakling either. His theoretical combat strength was at least A rank. While Rory, inheriting Thanos' genes, wasn't completely immune to magic, he wasn't someone that could be easily dealt with by simple instant cast spells. In fact, neither Rory nor the Ancient One used their full strength. The Ancient One could have used more powerful spells, but her goal was to send Rory away, not kill him, to avoid affecting her own timeline. Rory deliberately concealed his strength to feign weakness, aiming to lull the Ancient One and the approaching Strange into a false sense of security. With a thunderous crash, Rory overturned a building. The broken walls floated in midair. He kicked one of the walls and flew straight towards the Ancient One. With a whoosh, the Ancient One cleaved the broken wall in two. "Rory, give up. This is fate. To hell with fate. I won't accept it." In his battle with the Ancient One, Rory had gradually become familiar with his enhanced body, fighting with increasing ease. Rory had been holding back because he couldn't break through the mirrored space set up by the Ancient One. To leave, he needed a different method. Thus, a plan slowly took shape in Rory's mind. He shattered another runic shield, and just as his fist was about to slam into the Ancient One's face, a runic whip suddenly wrapped around Rory's hand. It wasn't the Ancient One. Turning his head, he saw Strange, wearing a cloak. A purple spatial rift had appeared in the sky. Dr. Strange might have come from here. With two generations of Sorcerers Supreme appearing before Rory simultaneously, He had almost no chance of winning. Ancient One, I swear, you'll regret this. With his arm bound, Rory stared intently at the Ancient One. The Ancient One remained silent, but Strange, who had floated over, spoke. Rory, you don't belong here. I'm here to take you back. Looking at the suddenly appearing Strange, Rory's eyes gleamed, a hint of excitement hidden beneath. This was a branching timeline, no longer the future he knew. Rory longed to return to his original, sacred timeline. Because foresight was Rory's greatest advantage. Moreover, Rory's original plan was to first deal with SHIELD and Steve, then find Hank Pym to obtain the Pym Particles, and use the time travel bracelet to return to 2023 to settle old scores with the original Steve. Previously, Rory lacked power and worried about being harassed by the Avengers. Now, with 3 genetic enhancements complete, his confidence had soared. If he didn't retaliate, his relentless efforts to increase his power would be meaningless. Doctor Strange's intention to take him back to the sacred timeline suited Rory perfectly. Of course, the Sorcerer Supreme wasn't so easily fooled. He still had to put on an act. HMPH, what are you pretending for? You Sorcerers Supreme are all like remote controls, using your power to dictate other people's fates. Your facade is so high, but the foundation is crooked, it'll collapse sooner or later. Strange made a gesture, and his rune whip tightened instantly around Rory. No need to waste your breath, saying more won't change our opinion of you. Strange nodded to the Ancient One, then pulled Rory towards the purple dimensional rift. Rory turned back and said, Ancient One, give me back my little white mouse. The Ancient One was silent for 2 seconds, then drew a small portal. On the other side of the portal was the little white mouse busy eating cookies. Squeak? The little white mouse peeked through the portal and immediately saw Rory, bound like a dumpling. Squeak. Squeak. Its 4 little legs wriggled around, and it scurried up onto Rory's shoulder. Strange glanced at the little white mouse, then pulled Rory directly into the purple dimensional rift. The next second after passing through the space-time rift, Rory and Strange appeared in the basement of the Sanctum Sanctorum in New York in 2023. With a whoosh, the portal opened, and Strange pulled Rory back into the Sanctum Sanctorum's main hall. Thank God, Dr. Strange, you succeeded. Steve Rogers happily stood up from his chair, then turned to Rory and greeted him. Rory, didn't expect we'd meet again, did you? Hell, of course I thought about it, but I was thinking I'd give you a big gift next time we met. Rory's lips curled slightly. There's no point in arguing now, let's talk about what to do with this guy. It was Falcon Sam who spoke. Inside the Sanctum Sanctorum in New York, besides Doctor Strange and Captain America Steve Rogers, were Falcon Sam, Bucky Barnes, Winter Soldier, and War Machine Rhodes. Strange spoke up, to prevent this man from destroying the entire timeline, I'll imprison him forever in the Sanctum Sanctorum cell. He'll spend the rest of his life here. Isn't there a more direct way, like? Bucky the Winter Soldier drew 2 lines on his neck with his thumb, as if to kill Rory outright. No, he's just a potential danger. We can't do that before he causes harm. Hypocritical platitudes. Several people took turns discussing Rory's fate, completely disregarding his well-being. Ha. Just as their discussion was heating up, Rory suddenly burst into laughter. What's he laughing at? How should I know? Maybe he's gone mad. The laughter stopped abruptly. Rory turned to Strange and said softly, it's a pity you lost the Time Stone. Without the Time Stone, the Sorcerer Supreme is just a magician. Strange frowned slightly. Rory continued, you don't think this little spell can bind me, do you? What do you mean? It's simple. The Ancient One has the Time Stone, I can't do anything to her. Dealing with 2 Sorcerers Supreme at the same time is a bit difficult for me, so. Rory became increasingly excited as he spoke. Strange's expression changed drastically. No. Hold him down. Unfortunately, it was too late. Without the Ancient One and the Time Stones restrained, Rory unleashed his full power, instantly tearing apart the rune whip and sending the nearest Winter Soldier flying with a single punch. The Winter Soldier crashed through the Sanctum Sanctorum gates and tumbled onto the street, startling passers-by. Indeed, this was all part of Rory's revised plan after entering the Ancient One's mirror image. After the final battle against the Avengers scattered, and Rory conveniently hitched a ride back to his original divine timeline. Doctor Strange didn't have the Time Stone. Lacking that overpowered item, Rory had no worries whatsoever. Whoosh, the rune whip reappeared, but Rory firmly grasped it in his hand. "Come here." With a forceful tug, Strange was pulled in front of Rory, who then delivered a backhand punch. Boom! Strange crashed into the wall and disappeared into the hall. Captain America Steve and Falcon Sam reacted and rushed towards Rory simultaneously. Steve without a shield and Falcon Sam with only a pistol were utterly weak. Snap! One hand hooked Sam's neck, the other blocked Steve's punch, and a kick to Steve's waist sent him flying out of the Sanctum Sanctorum. Chapter 39 Steve, I've brought the war you wanted. Deafening crash, Rory smashed through the roof of the Sanctum Sanctorum in New York, landing on the street with Falcon Sam in his arms. A few seconds later, the other superheroes emerged from the Sanctum Sanctorum and stood a short distance from Rory. Steve spoke up, "Rory, let Sam go. We can talk things out." Rory grinned, "Steve, are you related to Chameleon? You speak to people one way and switch channels the next." Strange opened a portal for James Rory, and in the blink of an eye, Rory, now dressed in War Machine, returned. The group surrounded Rory from all sides. Because Falcon Sam was in Rory's hands, they were hesitant to act rashly. "Rory, you can't escape. Let Sam go. We can sit down and talk things out." Steve, the only one who truly understood Rory, immediately began to reassure him. Rory shook his head and sighed. "Why does someone with the heart of a benefactor, offering installment payments, only charge me interest and do nothing?" "Steve?" Rory looked down at Falcon Sam, Captain America's successor. "How?" Snap, "No." Falcon Sam didn't even understand what was happening before Rory twisted his neck in half, killing him instantly. "Bastard." FKU. Several superheroes rushed at Rory simultaneously. Rory, undeterred by the punches of Winter Soldier and Steve, focused on dealing with the biggest threat, Strange. Bang! Rory shattered Strange's runic magic shield, the blow slamming into Strange's chest. Although Strange used magic to defend himself in time, he was still blasted away by Rory, crashing through a wall and returning to the Sanctum Sanctorum. A portal opened, and the mage surnamed Wang, who had just returned from buying groceries, stared at the Sanctum Sanctorum, now reduced to half its original size, his mind instantly going blank. Crash! Strange flung aside the rubble and planks pressing down on him and shouted at the sorcerer surnamed Wang, "Stop standing there. Call for help. Call whoever you can. Call every Avenger you can. And be quick." Strange finished speaking and flew outside again. At this moment, Rory was beating Steve mercilessly. Whoosh! Bang! War Machine, afraid of hurting Steve, dared not fire its powerful weapons and could only use the acceleration of its suit to shove Rory aside. Rory grabbed War Machine's ankle and was swept into the air. Crack! The metal armor at his ankle was crushed by Rory's squeeze, instantly losing power. Boom! 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 Rory fired 3 ultra-small missiles in succession but failed to harm Rory in the slightest. The weapon on his shoulder aimed at Rory and unleashed a barrage of ammunition, but it also failed to cause any effective damage. "Get down here." Rory used his powerful waist strength to propel himself through the air, forcefully changing Rory's flight direction, and crashed through an entire apartment building with a loud bang. He crashed from the 5th floor to the 1st, kicking up a cloud of dust. Rory clasped his hands together above his head, ready to smash Rhodes' iron head into a pancake. Whoosh! Suddenly, a white thread wrapped around Rory's arm and pulled him backward with great force. Caught off guard, Rory stumbled. "Hey! Sir, you shouldn't have done that. Who are you? I've never seen you before." "Oh, I remember now, you're the one who escaped. Sir, I advise you to surrender immediately, because of the Avengers. Spider-Man, you're too noisy." Rory tried the same trick again, attempting to pull Spider-Man, Peter Parker, towards him. Spider-Man reacted swiftly, immediately severing the web shooters. Rory didn't want to waste time with such a difficult superhero and had no intention of chasing Spider-Man. He turned and stomped on War Machine Rhodes' chest. Crack 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 ah ah. Ah! Rhodes screamed and spat out blood as his chest was crushed by the collapsing suit. "Rory! Stop right there." Steve angrily shoved Rory aside. Turning to Rory, he saw that Rory was barely breathing and needed immediate emergency care. "Bucky, you take Rory to the emergency room, I'll handle this." Before Steve could finish speaking, Rory kicked him away, sending him flying into a building across the street. When Rory turned back to deal with Rory, the heavily injured War Machine Rory was being pulled far away by Spider-Man Peter Parker's webs. Roar. Suddenly, a roar erupted, and the green behemoth descended from the sky, its 34-centimeter fist slamming into Rory's chest. Boom boom, Rory, sent flying, crashed through countless walls. Damn it, another problem. Falcon Sam and War Machine Rory were out of the picture, but two more formidable opponents, the Hulk and Spider-Man, had arrived. Dr. Banner was furious. He hadn't expected that simply finding some vibranium scraps for Rory's research would escalate to this point. Falcon Sam is dead, and War Machine Rhodes is critically injured and could die at any moment, which has enraged Dr. Banner. With a heavy snort, Dr. Banner smashes through several walls like a bulldozer as he charges towards Rhodes. Bang! Rhodes crosses his arms, actually blocking Dr. Banner's fist. The next second, an enormous foot lands on Rhodes' body. Damn, size advantage is really unfair. Rhodes' body aches, but he's not injured. You can knock me down, but you can't defeat me. That's the power of the destroyer of master genes. Although Dr. Banner is tossing Rhodes around like a ball, he can't break through Rhodes' defense. Rhodes can occasionally retaliate, but he can't break through Dr. Banner's defense either. In their fight, almost no one else can get involved, except for Spider-Man and Doctor Strange, who can provide occasional assistance. Doctor Strange. We can't keep fighting like this. The whole street is destroyed. If we continue, the entire city of New York will be reduced to ruins. Strange knew the danger was immense, and besides, Rory wasn't a puppet, he wouldn't be controlled by him. Meanwhile, Rory had completely given up on fighting Dr. Banner and instead focused on chasing the others. Bucky Barnes was escorting War Machine Rhodes to the hospital, and of the remaining few, Steve Rogers was the only easy target. With Steve and Strange together, Rory had no chance to deal with Steve, so he turned his attention to Spider-Man. Peter Parker ran ahead, Rory chased after him, and Dr. Banner followed closely behind. Wherever the three went, ruins were left behind. They pursued from Greenwich in the lower city to Midtown, with countless civilians scattering in panic. Oh God, why don't you go after someone else? I don't want to fight you. Dr. Banner is more suitable for you. I think you must be tired. Why don't you sit down and have a donut or a lemonade together? I wish you could stay away from me. Oh no. Peter Parker's mouth never stopped as he ran around. Chapter 40 is bad, there are still experts. Peter Parker, swinging on his web, reached the top of a building under construction in Midtown. Making a lookout gesture, he chuckled at the ant-sized Rory below. Hey, the stairs aren't finished yet, so you can't come up. Maybe I can take a break. Rory climbed swiftly along the building's scaffolding, with Dr. Banner chasing after him, leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. The scaffolding swayed precariously, and even several support frames of the tower crane were broken by Banner's repeated crashes. Rory seized his opportunity, grabbed the sling, and continued his rapid ascent to the roof. Roar. Banner had only one thought, to catch Rory and give him a good beating. Seeing Rory reach the top, Peter Parker, the little spider on the roof, shot out a web and swung away again. This time, however, Rory didn't chase him but instead disappeared inside. Dr. Banner followed closely behind. Rory. I thought you were a good person. But you've deceived us all. Dr. Banner roared angrily as Rory disappeared into the building. That was your fault. I was living a good life over there. It was Strange who insisted on bringing me back. Do you know why he brought me back? Because you superheroes wanted me dead. It was you Avengers who wanted to kill me. You killed Sam, and almost killed Rhodes. Rhodes wandered around the building, and Dr. Banner, unable to pinpoint Rhodes' location, stood in circles. Rhodes' mocking voice rang out again, You're allowed to kill me, but I'm not allowed to fight back. What kind of logic is that? Whoosh, the next second, Rhodes suddenly appeared behind Banner, a sling around Banner's wrist. Banner reacted quickly, immediately grabbing back, but Rhodes easily dodged. Swish. 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 In the blink of an eye, Dr. Banner was bound like a dumpling by the sling, and then Rhodes turned and ran. Banner's right arm, injured from using the Infinity Stones, hadn't fully healed, and he couldn't completely break free of the ropes for a moment. Just as Banner was about to give chase, he realized that the other end of the rope had somehow become firmly entangled in the building's structural pillars. Squeak. Boom. Boom. Banner's movement instantly snapped the already flimsy pillars. Rory hadn't just been dodging, he was destroying the entire building's structure, and it seemed to be working quite well. The nearly 50-story building under construction was severed in half, collapsing instantly and burying Dr. Banner alive in the rubble. The resulting dust and smoke swept across 3 streets. Strange and Steve, arriving later, were speechless with shock at the sight of the flying dust. "Oh my God. This is terrible." Peter Parker landed beside Steve, clutching his head in terror. Dr. Banner's fate was unknown, and Rhodey's whereabouts were also unknown. Strange formed hand seals and immediately cast a spell to clear the dust covering the streets, while Steve and Peter Parker searched for the injured or those in need of help. A sudden gust of wind arose, and under Strange's spell, the dust covering the city was instantly blown into the sky. Just as he was about to fall back to the ground, a figure suddenly darted in front of Strange. "The magician, your turn." Ronnie grabbed Strange with one hand, his other fist clenched. Just as Ronnie was about to finish Strange off, Strange's magic cloak suddenly flew out and tightly wrapped around Ronnie's arm, making it difficult to break free. Whoosh, spider silk wrapped around Ronnie's other hand, and Steve ran back, jumping behind Ronnie and tightly strangling Ronnie's neck with his arm. Ronnie pulled on the silk, and the little spider's legs sank deep into the asphalt, sliding forward, but still refusing to let go. At this moment, a small, rat-like white mouse crawled out from Ronnie's collar, turned its head left and right, and then immediately ran up Ronnie's arm to the magic cloak, frantically gnawing on it. Steve, who was strangling Ronnie's neck, felt utterly desperate. He hadn't expected Rory to be so powerful now. Although not as strong as Thanos, the despair he felt in battle was almost identical. "Steve, do you remember what I said back then?" "Rory, it's not too late for you to turn back now." Steve gritted his teeth, still not giving up. Rory smiled coldly. "Turn back? Didn't you ever think that Thanos was right?" This question made Steve pause for a moment. In that instant of Steve's hesitation, Rory broke free from his restraints. Perhaps hurt by the white mouse's bite, the magic cloak left Rory's wrist and flew high into the air, but was still being gnawed on by the white mouse. Rory pulled Peter Parker in front of him with his spider silk and punched him away, then turned around and pounded Captain America Steve to the ground. "Steve, you go first. I'll send your good brother Bucky to hell to reunite with you later." Suddenly, a red light enveloped Rory, and he found that his body was no longer under his control, slowly floating into the air. Turning his head, he saw the Scarlet Witch in a red trench coat emerge from the portal, her hands flashing with a magical red light. "Damn it, there's another expert." Seeing Rory immobilized, Strange, while forming hand seals, shouted, "Wanda! Control him. I'll open a dimensional portal and send him away." Rory was too difficult to kill now, even Dr. Banner couldn't kill him. To prevent further damage to the city, Strange decided to open a dimensional portal and send Rory inside, leaving him to fend for himself. Wanda nodded, continuing to manipulate magic to control Rory. Rory floated in midair and shouted to the Scarlet Witch, "Wanda, you can send me into the dimensional portal, but you'll lose your only chance to save Vision. Are you sure you want to do this?" Wanda's expression froze. Although her magic didn't stop, Rory clearly caught her thoughts. "Wanda, in the future, you and Vision will have 2 children, and the 4 of you will live happily in a small town. Vision loves your pies, and the children will hug you goodbye before going to school." Wanda was momentarily stunned. Strange, who was casting a spell, immediately shouted, "Wanda, wake up. Vision is dead. He's lying to you." "Wanda, in my world, Thanos didn't succeed, and Vision really survived. Don't you want to go see him and the children? They're waiting for you to come home." The red light on Wanda's hand gradually dimmed, and Strange increased the speed of his spellcasting again. Crash! Something seemed to shatter in midair, and a dark rift appeared above Manhattan. Strange couldn't care less. Countless ruined whips lashed out at Rory, who was about to escape, and then he immediately carried Rory towards the rift in the sky. Just as Strange was about to send Rory into the rift, Strange and Rory were instantly frozen in place. Wanda slowly floated up and whispered, "Strange, let him go." Chapter 41, The old Avengers just disbanded and they're already starting a new Avengers? "Wanda, let me go," Strange shouted anxiously. Wanda slowly floated from the ground to the opposite side of Strange, her tone harsh. "Give him to me. Wanda, do you know what you're doing? He's the destroyer of worlds. He'll destroy this world." Strange was sweating profusely. They were only a short distance from the rift in space-time. If they threw Rory in and closed the rift, everything would return to normal. But the Scarlet Witch, with her red eyes, stood in their way. Strange's heart was in his throat, He might be thrown out at any moment. I told you to give him to me. Scarlet Witch Wanda's magic and Strange's rune whip simultaneously fought for Rory. Rory smiled and continued, Wanda, perhaps you don't know, but Vision's body has been dismembered. Some people are using him as experimental material. Shut up. Strange roared, but it was too late. Ah! Scarlet Witch screamed, clutching her head. Red magic radiated outwards from her, instantly shattering the rune whip binding Rory. Strange tried to grab Rory, but was immobilized by Scarlet Witch's magic. A true supreme-level Strange's combat power could even rank S-Class, easily handling the A+ Scarlet Witch. But the current Strange was only at the level of an ordinary mage, and having lost the Time Stone, their magic was practically evenly matched. The two mages clashed, unleashing magical energy of various beautiful colors. Rory, falling back to the ground, adjusted his position, creating a deep crater with a loud thud. He'd narrowly escaped being sent interdimensional space by Strange. He then looked up at Steve, chuckling, Steve, now it's just the two of us. It's time to settle old scores. Captain America, Steve Rogers, wore an ambiguous expression. He had only intended to control potential risks, but had unexpectedly been forced to confront such a powerful enemy. Steve's expression stiffened. He remained silent for a long time before finally saying, Rhodes, look around. Look at everything you've done. What's there to see? You captured me, wanted to imprison me for life, even tried to kill me. What right do you have to judge me? Who do you think you are? Rhodes slowly walked up to Steve. He chuckled and continued, Steve, do you think that by rescuing those who disappeared and defeating Thanos, your Avengers are the superheroes who saved the Earth and the universe? At least we did what we were supposed to do. It was the Avengers' achievement, not solely Steve's, but he was proud of it. Hell, you're really pathetically stupid. Rhodes patted Steve's shoulder. Have you ever considered that Thanos was actually right? Justice is never about killing, and Thanos can't be just. Steve spoke firmly, because that was his belief. Rhodes smiled. Steve, let me tell you a truth. Every planet with intelligent life harbors a seed of a god. When the god awakens, that planet will be completely destroyed. Steve didn't believe it, his eyes fixed on the approaching Rhodes. Although Rory was strong, he wouldn't back down, because Captain America wouldn't run away. Rory, getting closer, continued, the condition for the true god to awaken is that life on this planet reaches a certain number. Thanos is a descendant of the Eternals, who are slaves of the Celestials. Thanos believes the Celestials are wrong, so he plans to randomly take half of the life to stop the Celestials from destroying planets with intelligent life in the universe. Steve shook his head firmly. Impossible, you're lying to me. Why would I lie to you? Rory said calmly, Thanos is fighting against the Celestials, saving more life and planets in the universe, acting as a balancer for the universe. The Avengers destroyed this balancer, and this is the righteous cause you're so proud of. Not every planet has as many superheroes as Earth. Those planets without superheroes will eventually be completely destroyed after giving birth to the Celestials. Rory shattered Steve's resolve, because the cause of justice was more important to him than life itself, as if it were his innate responsibility. Now someone was telling Steve that the righteous cause he was doing was actually wrong. What was he then? What did his sense of justice mean? The Celestials operate on the interaction of cosmic energy. Life in the universe is like cells parasitizing their bodies, which lives and which dies is utterly unimportant to them. Despite their constant fighting, even Thanos wiping out half of all life in the universe is merely a temporary fix, a trivial matter to the Celestials. Because in their eternal existence, time is the least important thing. As long as life continues, the nascent Celestials will eventually awaken. Steve, take your justice to hell. The countless battles of New York have come to an end once again. Steve Rogers, the symbol of America, is dead. The military arrives and collects Captain America's body. Is Steve really dead? Perhaps. Even those who have witnessed it still don't believe it. Strange and Scarlet Witch performed a magical show above Manhattan, then both fell into an alternate dimension. The rift closed, and the two never emerged again. Falcon Sam died, and War Machine Rhodes, though not dead, was rendered practically dead, with only his neck and one arm still functional. Dr. Banner returned to human form and departed in sorrow. No one knew where he went. The entire city and even the nation were plunged into grief, and the government held funerals for Captain America and Falcon. The sorcerer surnamed Wang sealed off the Sanctum Sanctorum in New York, using the knowledge of camouflage to search for Strange's whereabouts. Bucky Barnes, the Winter Soldier, went to Wakanda after attending the funeral. The Avengers were now only 1.5 members away from disbanding: Hawkeye Barton, who was absent, and Peter Parker, the half. The reason for half was that Peter Parker wasn't yet ready to become a true superhero. After this battle, Rhodes nearly wiped out the existing Avengers. Although they lost their superheroes, life had to go on, and the most noticeable change in New York City was a skyrocketing crime rate. The police struggled to handle supernatural events and were helpless against high-tech weapons. Spider-Man, the good neighbor, was either busy fighting crime or on his way to fight crime every day. That day, Spider-Man, having just apprehended a robbery, returned home to find a stranger inexplicably there. A one-eyed man in a black trench coat, bald with a hard-boiled head. Peter Parker had seen this man at his father Iron Man's funeral. "Sir, may I ask who you are?" Nick Fury, sitting calmly in a chair, said, "I already know what happened. The reason I'm here is to invite you to join SHIELD. I want to form a new Avengers." "But, sir, Nick Fury walked up to Peter Parker and patted him on the shoulder. "Son, I believe in you. We must work together to deal with that guy named Rhodes. But everyone is gone. I was there too, but I couldn't stop him. I'm sorry. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels." Chapter 42, Doing What Scientists Should Do. At the new Avengers headquarters, Nick Fury pulled out a photograph and said, "This is news we just received. A guy named Ronnie appeared in the Midwest, but his whereabouts are unknown." Hawkeye Barton crossed his arms and said, "We're probably no match for him. That's why I'm forming a new Avengers team, gathering more superheroes with superpowers to deal with Ronnie." Maria Hill produced a roster and said, "This is the list of all the superpowered candidates we can currently gather. What we need to do now is select new Avengers from among these people." While they were busy discussing how to form the new Avengers team, Ronnie had already driven to his destination, Chicago. The Chicago metropolitan area has a population of over 9 million, and the city itself has over 2.7 million, making it the third largest city in the United States. After arriving, it took Ronnie a full week to find the person he was looking for. He strolled through the streets, sipping juice. The streets were lined with houses, gardens, lawns, cottages, and children playing. One family of 3 caught Rory's attention. All 3 were male, and Rory wanted to, but this guy named Phantos was Rory's target, so he could only try to endure his physical discomfort. Phantos, one of the 10 Eternals of Earth, possessed the ability to create technology and machinery. The Eternals had once experienced a civil war, leading to the disintegration of the 2 factions. The defeated side was exiled and faced various hardships before escaping to Titan, the planet from which Thanos was born. The 2 branches of the Eternals developed in different directions. The victorious side excelled at using cosmic energy as their superpowers. The Eternals who escaped to Titan focused more on physical strength, transforming energy into powerful warriors. Thanos' genes originated from this. And the guy Rory found, Phantos, was a member of the Eternals who used cosmic energy. Seeing someone staring in the direction of his house, Phantos frowned and walked out, asking, "Sir, is there a problem?" Rory raised an eyebrow and smiled. "No, just curious about your lives." Phantos had suffered a lot of discrimination, but he stubbornly refused to acknowledge his millennia-old face, and no one could do anything about it. He could even calmly say, "We live very happily, and I hope you can find your own happiness too." Rory shook his head. "Your happy life ends here." "What? I don't understand, sir." Rory deliberately lowered his voice as he spoke, and Phantos unconsciously took a few steps closer. Now, the distance between Rory and Phantos was less than a meter. "I said, your good days are over." The abnormal beings on Earth had long been wiped out by the Eternals, and Phantos had lost his former vigilance and caution, not even carrying the space technology equipment he used to defend against enemies. The fat, dark-skinned Phantos' vision went black, and he instantly fainted. When he awoke, he found himself in an unfamiliar environment. Fixed to a metal lab table, surrounded by clean white walls, various tools lay beside it. A large, transparent glass wall revealed a variety of experimental equipment. A young man sat at a table, seemingly studying something under the light. Fastus recalled the entire ordeal. He had been knocked unconscious by this young man in front of his house. Although he didn't know the young man's purpose, it certainly wasn't anything good. Fastus struggled for a long time but couldn't get off the lab table. Then the young man turned and looked into the room through the glass, before getting up and entering. "Don't waste your energy. This is made of carbon alloy. You can't break free with your abilities," Rory explained, as he put on a brand new surgical gown, rubber gloves, a mask, and goggles. "Who are you? Why did you tie me up here?" Fastus shouted. Rory approached Fastus with a carbon alloy scalpel. "I'm a good person. I heard you were deeply saddened by the atomic bombing of Japan and even repented for it, so I intend to help you find peace. Who are you? What do you want to do to me?" Although the Eternals, who use cosmic energy, don't possess the physical strength of Master Mie, they are not easily dealt with by ordinary weapons. Rory used scissors to cut open Fastus's clothes, then drew several lines on his body with a white marker, marking several areas with X's, dark skin, hence the white marker. After finishing, Rory put down the marker and smiled faintly. "I'm very curious about the Eternals." Fastus was startled that Rory could call out the Eternals' names. Rory began preparing for disinfection. After the disinfection was complete, Rory turned and asked, "I heard the Eternals can use cosmic energy. Can you tell me about this energy? Let me go. If you let me go, I'll definitely tell you." Fastus looked at the gleaming scalpel, his heart pounding with panic. This was the closest he had ever been to death in thousands of years. Rory shrugged. "No need. I trust what I see more." During the recent Battle of New York, Rory had very obvious weaknesses. Lacking effective offensive methods and mobility, he possessed only immense strength, so he set his sights on the Eternals. Rory was extremely envious of the Eternals' various superpowers, especially their near-invincible abilities of flight and speed. Rory inherited Thanos' genes, making him a branch of the Eternal bloodline. Theoretically, he had a high probability of being able to use cosmic energy. Fastus was the closest to him and the weakest, making him a perfect starting point for his research. The Eternals originated from humans but were modified by the Celestials. Overall, they were no different from humans, including their skin, organ structure, and metabolic processes. The biggest difference was their density. Rory was puzzled. He had assumed the Celestials would implant something inside the Eternals' bodies to allow them to use cosmic energy, but now it seemed that wasn't the case. Where is cosmic energy? How is it used? Rory murmured curiously. Energy law. Conversion methods and sources. You probably don't know either. Oh well, I'll figure it out myself. Having been busy all day, Rory had dismantled Fantas into countless pieces. He didn't know when Fantas died, nor did he care. All he wanted to know was what form cosmic energy actually took. Chapter 43 Desperate Pursuit of the Secret of Eternity. Blood cells are highly active, and their cell membranes are different from humans. Could this be the reason for conducting cosmic energy? Rory compared his own blood with that of the Eternals. The similarity was almost 99.99%, with only this one difference. But he didn't find any cosmic energy in the blood, which was very strange. Could it be that there's no energy after death? Rory was unwilling to give up and continued searching other parts of the body. Heart, nothing. Brain? Still nothing. He had basically searched every part of Fastus's body, but still couldn't find anything different. Strange, this shouldn't be. As long as it's energy, it must exist in some form, whether visible or not, it's there. Whether it could be used or not was another matter. Rory's first priority was to confirm that cosmic energy truly existed. Does being dead not work? Should I go and catch a living one? Rory sat in his chair, lost in thought for a long time, then turned to look at the remaining skeleton. Just as he was about to give up, his eyes suddenly sharpened, and he quickly put on gloves and went over. There's still bone marrow. Bone marrow is the main hematopoietic organ, containing hematopoietic stem cells and various stromal cells. The Eternals possess near-infinite lifespans. The biggest challenge in maintaining this near-infinite life lies in metabolism and stem cell production. The Eternals' blood contains cosmic energy, originating from their bone marrow. Therefore, the source of the Eternals' cosmic energy is very likely within their bone marrow. However, the next problem stumped Rory. Fantas's bones were incredibly hard, a scalpel couldn't cut them. Damn it, I'll break them open if I have to. I want to see just how hard you are. SHIELD's temporary base was located in the suburbs of New York. Nick Fury sat at his desk reviewing the files of all the superpowered individuals. Maria Hill walked in, and Nick Fury looked up and asked, "How's the recruitment of the new Avengers going?" "It's going fairly smoothly. The people sent to Asgard have sent back news that they can't contact Thor yet." Thor was currently traveling around with the galactic meddling team, making contact difficult. "Has Dr. Banner been found?" "Yes, he's back in his human form and found himself an ordinary job." During the Battle of New York, Rhodes caused Dr. Banner to lose his teammates. He possessed a strong body, but suffered severe psychological trauma. After this trauma, Dr. Banner never transformed into the Hulk again, lost interest in academic research, and simply found a job in a factory, working as a screwdriver. Nick Fury handed a thick stack of files to Maria Hill, saying, "These are the shortlisted candidates. Arrange for someone to contact them sometime." "So many? Are you going to build an Avengers army?" SHIELD has a list of superpowered individuals from around the world, and these individuals are prohibited from using their superpowers in real life. Go and get it done. We'll talk about it when Carol Danvers returns. Nick Fury felt a pang of regret. If Doctor Strange and Scarlet Witch Wanda were still around, it might have been easy to handle. Now, he could only patiently wait for Captain Marvel's return. More than half a month passed in a flash. During these 2 weeks, Nick Fury tirelessly contacted various superpowered individuals, preparing for the new Avengers. Meanwhile, Rory wasn't idle either. He cracked open Phastus's bones and obtained the Eternal's bone marrow. After some research, he discovered that the Eternal's bone marrow was indeed vastly different from humans. The bone marrow contained a special substance that constantly absorbed cosmic energy, maintaining its activity even after Phastus's death. After absorbing cosmic energy, this substance converted and transported it to bone marrow stem cells, which then produced fresh blood capable of transmitting cosmic energy. As long as cosmic energy existed, the production of fresh blood would never cease, which was the true reason for the Eternal's infinite lifespan. Rory coveted this substance, but he worried about whether it could fuse with his own bone marrow, and whether it might even replace Thanos' genes. After researching the Eternal secrets, Rory immediately began studying the mysterious substance. After only a few attempts, he successfully extracted it. Testing with his own blood showed perfect fusion, but the problem was that the fused blood was quickly metabolized, and the absorbed energy couldn't be converted through hematopoiesis. So the question was, how could he inject this substance into his own bone marrow? He couldn't insert a regular needle, and he couldn't make a special kind. Currently, the only known country with sufficient technology and materials was Wakanda, an African nation with the most advanced technology on Earth, yet still using spears as weapons. And given his current relationship with the Avengers, Wakanda would absolutely not help him. Headache. While Cabina alloy wasn't as strong as vibranium, it might be worth a try. At least 2 bone marrow aspirations would be needed. The first would extract bone marrow and the substance for relevant experiments, and only after confirming everything was okay would a second aspiration be performed. If other problems arose, several more aspirations might be required. Rory didn't want to suffer this ordeal, but he had no choice. Doctor Strange and Scarlet Witch could return at any moment, as could Thor and Captain Marvel. The only way to survive was to continue becoming stronger. Rory immediately dialed the Cabina alloy manufacturer number. "Hello, this is Bollywood Smelting Company. How can I help you? Could you make a size 16 bone marrow aspiration needle using carbon alloy? I'd like 2 sets. Carbon alloy, also known as carbon steel nanometal, is second only to vibranium in hardness. Dr. Octopus's tentacles are made of this material. It's synthetic, but a bit pricey." "Okay, sir, please wait a moment." A few minutes later, customer service replied, "Sir, our company can make it, but you need to confirm the style and specifications on site. After confirmation, you'll need to pay a 50% deposit." Rory thought for a moment and replied, "Give me an address, I'll come over when I have time." He noted down the address and hung up. His trip to Chicago was essentially over. He collected all the bone marrow tissue, packed Phastus's body into an iron box, and planned to bury it or sink it in a lake before leaving. A few more days passed. Rory extracted all the material from Phastus's bone marrow and then drove away from Chicago. Bollywood Smelting Company, headquartered in Philadelphia, was a professional smelting company and the only company Rory could find that possessed carbon alloy. Rory arrived at Bollywood Smelting Company a few days later, and was immediately given an exceptionally warm welcome. "Sir, we have prepared a lounge and a sumptuous meal for you. Please follow me." As the saying goes, skill breeds daring. Rory didn't know what this company was up to, but he was sure he would find out soon. Following the receptionist into the lounge, he saw spacious sofas, a huge TV, and a coffee table laden with all sorts of food, drinks, and even cigars. Rory didn't touch any of the things. He had only been sitting for a few minutes when the lounge door opened again. P.S. Thanks to Reader for the 1666 reward. Thanks to all the brothers for the recommendation tickets and monthly tickets. Keep going. Don't stop. Also, I'm asking for more reading data. The condition for advancement during the recommendation period is reading data, so please help me out, brothers. Chapter 44. Let's cooperate. You help me fight the Avengers. The man who entered looked familiar, and after a few seconds, Rory remembered who he was. The man sat down and said with a stern face, "Rory, although we've never met, I've heard of you a long time ago. What does General Ross want with me?" Rory asked indifferently. "To be precise, I'm a former lieutenant general in the army, and my current position is Secretary of State, specifically responsible for the control of superpowered individuals." Ross had an extraordinary obsession with superpowered individuals. The Sokovia Accords were proposed by this old man, and he personally oversaw their drafting and implementation. He wanted to monitor and control the Avengers' actions at the time, ultimately leading to the Avengers Civil War. Although the Avengers disintegrated, a portion of the Avengers, led by Iron Man Tony Stark, signed the Accords, and General Ross was officially promoted to Secretary of State for this achievement. Rory asked curiously, "You've come to see me to monitor me?" He didn't believe Ross didn't know what he had been doing in New York, yet he still came. Rory couldn't think of any other reason why General Ross wanted to see him. General Ross's mustache twitched slightly as he said, "I've read your report. It records that you're an excellent biologist, capable of developing a super serum single-handedly. I believe there's significant potential for collaboration between us." General Ross knew this because he'd received information from the Avengers. While Steve wouldn't tell General Ross directly, Falcon, Sam, and War Machine were both military personnel, and any information on this matter would certainly be reported. Especially after witnessing Rory's combat prowess in New York, Ross was even more determined to cooperate with Rory. Rory became interested and asked, "How do you want to cooperate? Or to put it bluntly, what do you want, and what can you offer me?" Seeing Rory's straightforwardness, General Ross didn't beat around the bush and said directly, "I want a super serum, a very strong one. As for what I can give you, name your price, anything I can satisfy." "Really anything?" General Ross nodded slightly. Rory tapped his fingers on the sofa armrest twice, pondered for a moment, and then said, "Cooperation is fine, but first I need an identity, an official one, and to clarify the New York incident through official channels." "No problem, I can issue you the appointment document for a military research advisor right now." Rory shook his finger. "Secondly, I need you to find a few people for me and use official power to help me carry out the arrest operation." Ross didn't agree immediately this time, but asked curiously, "Could you tell me who they are?" "Aliens. You can use the name of your country. If you can arrange for the Avengers to take action, that would be even better." Ross wasn't surprised. Earth had practically become a space hotel in the last decade, with aliens coming to Earth every now and then. Ross said softly, "I need more detailed information on that." "Anything else?" "One last request, help me deal with the Avengers." This. Ross seemed to doubt if he had heard correctly. He wanted the Avengers to help him deal with aliens on one hand, and was also plotting against them on the other. How cunning. "That's right," Rory affirmed. "It's about dealing with the Avengers." General Ross shook his head repeatedly. "It's not that I don't want to help you. To be honest, I also dislike the Avengers. But I don't have the ability to deal with them. Ross could at most put pressure on the Avengers, and that would be in the name of the nation and its people." Rory smiled confidently. "What's so difficult about that? You can recruit your own superhumans, and the serum I give you can also create powerful super soldiers. But how about this? I see you're not young anymore. How about I extend your lifespan a bit more?" Lifespan is the most difficult yet most desired of all human desires. From the emergence of ancient witchcraft to the modern-day desperate research into powerful gene serums by various countries, the ultimate goal of government approval and even funding is to break through the limits of lifespan. In the eyes of politicians, power is more useful than strength. Ross was no exception to this law. Looking at Rory in shock, Ross asked, "Can you really do that?" "It's still in the experimental stage. Theoretically, it's successful. We need to conduct live experiments to verify the hypothesis." "Deal. Theoretical success is real success. If the experiment fails, we can just try a few more times." In Ross's eyes, Rory had briefly appeared in New York. At that time, Rory was still an ordinary person, and was later captured by Steve and his men. Although he didn't know what had happened during that time, Rory's ability to suddenly transform from an ordinary person into a superhuman capable of taking on a group of Avengers single-handedly showed that his abilities in the biological field were definitely not just talk. That afternoon, Rory was taken to a military base by military vehicles, and his appointment as a research advisor was announced. Clarifying the New York incident wasn't as simple as issuing a news report. Ross needed to go back and make detailed plans, requiring at least a few more days of preparation time. Accompanied by Ross, Rory visited the military base's laboratory. The support from the state and taxpayers was indeed substantial, the area was larger than imagined, and all kinds of advanced equipment were available. Almost any experimental material that could be named could be found here. After circling around, the two entered the elevator, and Ross swiped his card to enter the underground area. "The security level here is higher, your lab is over there." Ross pointed in one direction, but instead of leading Rory there, he led him in another. Reaching a glass window, Rory looked inside. 5 or 6 researchers were busy working around an experimental table. Rory was slightly surprised when he saw the person lying on the table. Steve Rogers? Although Captain America is dead, his body is still very valuable for research, Ross said casually. Steve Rogers and Falcon Sam's funerals were held in front of the entire nation. Probably no one would expect Captain America's body to be here. If the news leaked, the Avengers would go crazy. In fact, the Avengers were already close to going crazy. When Nick Fury saw Rory become a research advisor for the military, his only eyeball nearly popped out of its socket. "Fuck you. Fuck. Damn it. That damn Ross." Nick Fury was cursing furiously in his office, using almost every curse word he could think of to insult Ross. He was busy preparing for the new Avengers, and Ross had just recruited Lowry? What did that make him? The Joker? The Avengers couldn't take action against the government. This could only be resolved through negotiation, which was the most troublesome issue for him. Lowry had almost destroyed Midtown Manhattan and tore the Avengers apart, and now he was one of his own? Was this something a human being would do? Nick Fury wanted nothing more than to fly to Secretary Ross and give him a good beating. Chapter 45 Ross backstabs the new Avengers and Mama's fuck. Superpowers, power, and love, these 3 things share a common thread. They all possess a strong sense of exclusivity. People desperately crave what they lack, and once they obtain it, they don't want others to receive the same treatment. Those who have already benefited block others from obtaining the same advantages, even someone as righteous as Captain America. Steve Rogers deemed this a potential risk because he believed it could cause danger, so he decided to stop him. Yes, that person was Rhodes. Steve Rogers also bears significant responsibility for the 1970 timeline branch. But ultimately, all the blame fell on Rhodes, which is why he was determined to resist. "I'm already a more powerful superhuman than you, why should I suffer this injustice?" A weakling, under the guise of upholding world peace and justice, tries to suppress someone who has the potential to become powerful. This is no different from bullying a promising newcomer in the workplace. Moreover, the Avengers' attitude towards Rhodes wasn't just about suppression, they wanted him dead. Steve's body lay before Rory, Strange vanished, but the fire in Rory's heart hadn't died down. Instead, it had shifted to the Ancient One in the 2008 branch timeline. Crossing the multiverse and time travel were 2 different concepts. Going back wouldn't be easy. Rory secretly vowed that if he had the chance to return, he would settle scores with the Ancient One. "Dr. Rory, the super serum is in your hands now. I'll look forward to your good news." Ross was reminding Rory about preparing the life-extending drug for him. Leaving the lab where Captain America had been dissected, he turned and headed to the lab prepared for Rory. The preparations were somewhat rushed. When he entered, several researchers were planning the placement of experimental equipment, checking and debugging every single detail. Ross pointed to the group and said, "These are the research assistants I've prepared for you. They will help you complete your research. If you need anything in your daily life, You can arrange for them to do it. To put it nicely, they were assistants. To put it bluntly, weren't they just there to monitor him? Whatever, Rory said nonchalantly, as long as it doesn't disturb my research. When can you send me the bone marrow aspiration needle made of carbonara? Rory suddenly changed his mind. Do you have any vibranium here? A needle made of vibranium might be more effective. Ross hesitated for a moment and said, we do have some, but not much. Although Wakanda had been open for a while, they hadn't obtained much vibranium. Most of the vibranium in the base was salvaged from Captain America's shattered shield. Making a bone marrow aspiration needle won't take much, right? Rory raised an eyebrow. Who wouldn't like getting something for free? If possible, he even wanted to make a suit of armor out of vibranium. Spider-Man Peter Parker asked eagerly, are we just going to let it go like this? Of course not, but Rory is now with the military, and we can't take action against them. Nick Fury was already a villain, but now he was even more blatantly so. Hawkeye Barton asked, it's an undeniable fact that Ronnie and the Avengers fought a major battle in New York. He should stand trial. Although Hawkeye Barton doesn't have superpowers, he's an original shareholder of the Avengers, and his pressure will put Nick Fury in a difficult position. Maria Hill quickly interjected, Clint. This was orchestrated by Secretary Ross. Nick Fury didn't want it to be this way. Hawkeye Barton persisted, does the Secretary of State change the fact that the Avengers were killed? If all politicians treat the Avengers this way, then I need to consider whether I should leave the Avengers. Clint Barton was absolutely unyielding. He didn't sign the Sokovia Accords and represented the Avengers' stance. If he also backed down, it would be a complete betrayal of the Avengers and his former comrades. Furthermore, Barton categorized Nick Fury as a politician, implicitly questioning the impartiality of the Avengers' leadership. Nick Fury himself was also incredibly distressed. He had to consider the relationship with the military from a national perspective while simultaneously calming the Avengers' emotions. Playing both the father and mother role was tough. Leaving the problem to Nick Fury, Clint Barton turned and walked out of the office. An old friend, Black Panther Chatra, walked up to him in the corridor. Clint, I'm so sorry about Steve and Sam. Barton shook his head. How's Bucky? After the Battle of New York, Bucky, the Winter Soldier, went to Wakanda and told Chatra everything that had happened. Chatra was the only outside help Bucky could find. Upon learning that Nick Fury was forming a new Avengers team, Chatra immediately brought Bucky back to New York. He's fine. You need to cheer up too, we still have a tough battle to fight. After greeting him, Clint Barton went to the new Avengers training base. He brought the second Hawkeye and the second Black Widow, Yelena, who were currently training on the field. Every time Barton saw Yelena, he was reminded of Natasha, forever left on Vormir. Hey Clint, when are we moving? The second Hawkeye, Kate, put away her bow and arrow and walked over to ask. Barton pursed his lips, not telling her the truth, but instead said, Nick Fury is recruiting more new Avengers. Focus on your training, we'll let you know when it's time to move. Night fell, and Hawkeye Barton drove away from the new Avengers base. After several hours, he arrived at the military base where Rhodey's lab was located. He sat on a small hill, staring blankly at the base in the distance, lost in thought. Inside the military base, Rhodey sat in front of a microscope conducting a cell biopsy experiment. He extracted a small amount of bone marrow from Captain America, Steve Rogers, and then injected it with a special substance of eternal cosmic energy. Steve was an enhanced human. His genetic strength was far superior to that of ordinary humans. Before Rhodey could extract his own bone marrow, using his was perfect for the experiment. The special substance that could absorb cosmic energy was named the Celestial Gene by Rhodey, not a gene found in the Celestials, but a gene created by them. Rory wasn't an energy scientist or a cosmic ray expert. He didn't know what cosmic energy was and could only look for feasibility at its source. Bone marrow fusion was the only method he could think of. Through the microscope, Rory discovered that after fusing with the celestial genes, Steve's cells had become active again. Cosmic energy continuously nourished Steve's bone marrow cells, allowing them to divide multiple times per second. However, lacking a carrier, this energy was quickly depleted. Rory immediately studied the divided Steve's cells and discovered that the new cell membranes could indeed conduct cosmic energy. Could anyone evolve into an eternal? That's too unbelievable. In fact, Rory had oversimplified things. The Celestials existed before the universe itself, And although the Eternals were modified from humans, it was definitely not that simple. Chapter 46 Red Skull, I'm the MVP. Rory stared blankly at the data report on the combination of Captain America Steve's genes and the Celestial genes for a long time. He ultimately decided that before initiating the Celestial gene bone marrow injection, it was necessary to conduct a live experiment first, otherwise, he might ruin it and regret it later. He put away the report and left the lab late at night. Crossing the military base's grassland, he was about to return to the high-class accommodations Ross had arranged for him when he suddenly stopped halfway. He turned and looked at a small hill not far from the military camp, staring at it for a moment before turning and walking towards it. The camp's fence and wire mesh were 3 or 4 meters high, which Rory easily leaped over. You've come to see me? That's right. I want to know how to kill you. Hawkeye Barton sat calmly on the ground, his eyes and tone indifferent. Rory smiled and sat down next to Barton. Why would you want to kill me? The two chatted like old friends who hadn't seen each other for years. Clint Barton's face showed a hint of weariness. You killed Steve and Sam, so you deserve to be judged. As one of the few ordinary people in the Avengers, his fate was better than most. His wife and children were rescued after being killed by Thanos. Although his wife was also a SHIELD agent, they had a good relationship, and they had adorable children. Now, they had even found Hawkeye's successor. He should have been enjoying his retirement, but instead, he appeared before Rhodes. Rory chuckled, they wanted to kill me. I was just acting in self-defense. If you're bad, practice more. There's no need to come to me complaining. Barton tossed aside the pebble he was playing with and said, you'll definitely lose, just like Thanos. You can never defeat the Avengers because we're a team, family, unless you kill me now. Rory asked curiously, you came here just to make me kill you? You didn't hide a camera somewhere, did you, so that after I kill you, it will be leaked and the military will remove me from the list? Rory guessed right, Clint Barton really was thinking that. Rory was too powerful, so powerful that even a superhero teaming up with Captain America, Doctor Strange, Hulk, and Spider-Man wouldn't be a match for him. He was an Avenger without superpowers, and now the only thing he could do was find a reasonable excuse for the new Avengers to act, using his own death to ignite their fighting spirit. But Barton hadn't expected Rory to guess it. Seeing Barton remain silent, Rory chuckled. Rory leaned back against a rock. Here, there was no light pollution, no billowing clouds, making the night sky seem even brighter. Clint, do you remember Natasha? Natasha from Vormir. Clint paused, his hand fiddling with pebbles, and frowned. Why are you bringing her up? Nothing, I just feel her death was so undeserved. Rory spoke calmly, but his words enraged Hawkeye Barton. No, her death was the most worthwhile. She saved everyone. Is that really true? Rory glanced at Barton and continued, then why was it her who died? Barton's expression twisted. Natasha died for him, for the Avengers, and for all the lives lost after Thanos' destruction. In Clint's heart, no one could be greater than Natasha. Rory, however, poured cold water on Clint's head at this moment. Did you two ever consider killing that red-faced guy to get the Soul Stone? Clint Barton's expression froze. Looking at Rory with the eyes of someone looking at an idiot. He sneered, only by sacrificing the one you love can you get the Soul Stone. You don't understand Natasha's greatness at all. This love doesn't necessarily have to be romantic love, it can also be familial love or friendship. One soul for another soul, that's the rule of the Soul Stone. Rory suppressed a smile and asked, who told you this rule? Naturally, it's the guide who guards the Soul Stone, Clint Barton said matter-of-factly. Then why did he tell you all this? As soon as Rory asked this question, Clint Barton froze on the spot, as if he had turned into a stone that wouldn't move. But Thanos, that's hilarious. If Red Skull hadn't said that, do you think Thanos would have used him to get the Soul Stone? Red Skull had completely fooled Thanos and the Avengers. If Red Skull hadn't offered his lover's life for the Primal Stone, it would definitely have been Red Skull who died. It's a soul for a soul, it doesn't necessarily have to be a soul filled with love. A soul filled with love might have one advantage: after using the Primal Stone, he could meet his loved one again in a dream world. Rory stood up, laughing, and left the earthen mound, returning to the military base. Clint Barton, utterly bewildered, stood there in a daze. Inside the military base, the accommodation Ross had provided for him was extremely luxurious, a fully furnished 2-story house. Someone would come regularly to clean and replenish the refrigerator with drinks, beer, food, and firewood for the fireplace. The only downside was that he couldn't bring laboratory materials into the residence. Not that it was forbidden, but the residence didn't have a lock. Rory opened a beer, put on some light music, and sat down in the cigar chair in front of the fireplace, feeling the warmth emanating from it, but his mind was preoccupied with questions about experiments. Conducting human experiments at the military base wasn't difficult. Prison inmates seeking pardons, and disabled soldiers who couldn't care for themselves and wanted to leave a large sum of money to their families, most of these people would actively seek out human experiments. Luo Rui planned a bone marrow aspiration experiment to fuse the celestial gene. The first batch would consist of 2 subjects, one ordinary person and one person who received serum injections. After obtaining the data, a decision would be made on whether to perform a bone marrow aspiration on himself. He acted immediately, arriving at the lab the next day and calling Secretary of State Ross to explain the situation. Secretary Ross quickly approved the human trial procedures, and the selected subjects would be delivered to the military base 3 days later. During these 3 days, Luo Rui focused on one thing, studying the characteristics of the celestial gene. It was difficult, but not without results. Inside the lab, the experimental assistants were facing an even greater challenge. They were assigned to monitor Luo Rui and steal as much important experimental data as possible. But Luo Rui used Chinese characters, and in a style of cursive script that even Chinese people couldn't understand. How could they overcome this? Luo Rui prepared intensively for 3 days, but just as he was waiting to receive the subjects, he discovered they hadn't arrived on time. A call to Ross revealed that Secretary Ross was also facing difficulties. The Secretary of State has been sued. SHIELD and the Avengers have taken him to Congress on national security grounds and halted all related experiments. They're clearly trying to use political means to remove Rory from the military base lab. The hearing is in 7 days. Even if Secretary Ross wins, Rory will have to wait at least another 10 days before seeing the test subject. Turning a blind eye when you can't win, that's Nick Fury's style. P.S. Thanks to readers. 20220629133234179 for the 100-coin reward, and thanks to readers 20250209204613670 for the 100-coin reward. Chapter 47: A villain who wants to be a superhero. Squeak Squeak the little white mouse, perched on the table, stood upright, its bright little eyes fixed on Luo Rui. When Luo Rui took out the syringe with a needle, the mouse even showed a frightened, almost human-like expression. Luo Rui's lips curled up slightly. "You little thing are quite interesting." The needle slowly approached, and the mouse pushed it away with its pink paws, squeaking twice. Such a clearly biased action could only be performed by a creature with a certain level of intelligence, and a mouse was definitely not among them. Luo Rui immediately became interested, holding up the needle and asking, "Don't you want a shot?" Squeak. The mouse turned counterclockwise once. "Can you understand what I'm saying?" Squeak. It turned counterclockwise again. Luo Rui put down the needle, placed his hands on the experimental subject, and stared at the mouse, continuing to ask, "Are you hungry? Do you know what a circle is?" "Yes." Luo Rui repeated the test several times, confirming that the mouse's intelligence was quite extraordinary, even able to distinguish most words. In terms of expression, there are only 2 concepts, yes and no. Yes rotates counterclockwise, and no rotates clockwise. This discovery led Rory to a new research direction. The brain is the most mysterious area of the human body. Intelligence, memory, reaction speed, and so on, are all inextricably linked to the brain's neural pathways. In the Marvel Universe, there is an even more important attribute, mental strength. Rory underwent 3 gene enhancements, inheriting almost 90% of Thanos' genetic strength, but only his body was strengthened, his brain remained unenhanced. The mice, injected with the same serum as Rory, received brain enhancement, 2 completely different directions of evolution. Rory immediately grabbed his notebook to record the relevant information. Of course, blood drawing was unavoidable, even with the mice's pitiful pleading eyes, they couldn't escape Rory's needle. The changes in the mice's expressions before and after the blood draw were enough to be used as memes. "Hey Angus." Angus, one of Ross's lab assistants, immediately scurried over upon hearing Rory's call. "Dr. Rory, what can I do for you?" Go and make a home for this little thing, something comfortable. Angus had thought it was academic research work, but he was surprised to find he was asked to make a home for a mouse. He was internally groaning, but dared not refuse aloud. Yes, Dr. Rory. Rory extracted a little blood from the mouse and put it into the instrument, then compared the data with his own blood. One serum enhancing 2 organisms, ultimately achieving 2 enhancement effects, was a very good research topic for Rory. When the serum was created, Rory programmed it according to his own genetic code, so strictly speaking, the mouse carried Rory's genes. No wonder the mouse was so close to Rory, the answer was here. When Rory was doing his research, the mouse didn't run around, it was either washing itself or adjusting its position to stare at Rory. Bored, he would crawl back into Rory's pocket and take a nap. 6 days passed in the blink of an eye. During these 6 days, Rory created several different serums, a regular Captain America enhancement serum, a secondary serum extracted from mice, and hematopoietic stem cells from the Eternal's bone marrow. Hematopoietic stem cells stripped of celestial genes didn't have an enhancing effect, but they could enhance human bodily functions, reactivating hematopoietic and metabolic abilities. While they couldn't restore youth, they could increase lifespan by 2 to 50 years, depending on individual circumstances. The lab assistants recorded all of Rory's experiments but still couldn't understand what he was doing. Even after secondary research, they found nothing special about the completed serums, and they didn't even know what algorithms or methods Rory used to synthesize the enhancement serums. These serums all had one thing in common: they had all undergone genetic encryption. The rewriting of the genetic code was like adding an extra lock. No one but Rory with a key could open it. Rory didn't come to the lab on the second day. Instead, he arranged for a military vehicle to take him to prison outside Washington, D.C. This prison housed the notorious criminal, Ross's creation, the super soldier Abomination Bronsky, one of the Hulk's nemesis. Rory got out of the car, showed the documents Ross had provided, and easily entered the prison. Prison staff led Rory underground, opening a heavy iron door to Bronsky's cell. Bronsky was like a fish in a tank, dressed in an orange prison uniform and confined in a circular glass enclosure, with no privacy whatsoever. Rory had long wanted to study the Hulk's genes, but had never had the opportunity. Now, being able to study Abomination wasn't a complete waste. Bronsky swiveled in his chair, looking at Rory, and asked curiously, "Who are you? I don't think I've seen you before." Bronsky had seen almost everyone who came here. Rory was the first stranger he'd met recently. Rory walked over, opened the small food delivery window, and said, "Hold out your hand." Bronsky obeyed. The years of imprisonment had long since stilled the resentment in his heart. Rory pulled out a syringe and inserted it into Bronsky's vein, but instead of blood, bright red blood came out. Bronsky asked curiously, "Sir, are you a new scientist?" Rory didn't answer, but instead asked, "Do you only bleed green blood after you transform?" Bronsky nodded. Rory withdrew the syringe and waved to the guard, "Open the door, I need to go in." "Sorry, sir, that's not in accordance with regulations." The guard naturally refused Rory's offer without hesitation. Rory didn't press the guard further, but instead used the carbon fiber needle on Bronsky. "Could you please draw some blood for me after you transform?" Bronsky looked at Rory with a bewildered expression, holding the needle. "Why should I do this?" Rory produced a document issued by General Ross, saying, "I am a research consultant for the military laboratory. If you do as I say, you might be able to leave this place in the future. If you refuse, I guarantee you'll never get out." Bronsky had been a special operations soldier, invited by General Ross to participate in the capture of Banner. He was a pure soldier, but after witnessing the Hulk's power, Bronsky also yearned for that power, so he readily accepted the military's serum injection experiment, officially becoming an enhanced soldier. Bronsky originally thought he could become like Captain America, injecting himself with Hulk's blood with the obsession of defeating the Hulk. After being defeated by the Hulk, he was imprisoned here, while outside, the Hulk became a wildly popular superhero. Holding the syringe, Bronsky heard he still had a chance to escape, and without hesitation, he took off his orange prison uniform and transformed into Abomination. Abomination was much larger than Banner's Hulk form, and from the beginning, he retained his self-awareness. If it weren't for the Hulk's ability to grow stronger with anger, Bronsky might not have lost. Chapter 48: A person who can live and die with the universe. Unlike the Hulk, Bronsky, transformed into Abomination, wasn't muscular, He was more bony and had gill-like ears. He carefully inserted the carbon fiber needle into his arm. A trickle of emerald green blood traveled through a tube and glass window to the collection vial in Rory's hand. Only after it was full did Abomination remove the needle. "Sir, when can I leave?" Rory collected the blood sample and smiled. "I can get you out of here now through illegal means. If you go through legal means, you'll have to wait a while, but it shouldn't be too long." Bronski, of course, wanted to leave legally, otherwise, his years in prison would have been wasted. Rory walked out of the prison with the blood sample, and just as he got into his car and drove away, Nick Fury got out of another car. Nick Fury's purpose for coming was to recruit Abomination, but he hadn't expected to run into Rory here. He glanced deeply in the direction Rory had left, then turned and went into the prison. As Rory's Hummer military vehicle entered the city, while waiting at a red light at an intersection, a sudden loud crash drew his attention. Looking through the windshield, he saw 3 trucks had collided at the intersection. While others focused on the accident scene, Rory noticed someone unusual. He patted a soldier on the shoulder and pointed at the man, saying, "Follow him." "Yes, sir." The military Hummer immediately rammed through the private cars blocking its path and sped off in the direction the man had gone. Just moments before, everyone had been captivated by the horrific scene of the crash, but Rory had noticed an unharmed person amidst the 3 vehicles. Who could emerge unscathed from the impact of 3 trucks? An ordinary person simply couldn't. The man nonchalantly got into one of the vehicles, started the engine, and drove along the street, quickly arriving at a manor on the outskirts of the city. A military Hummer pulled up in front of the manor. Rory got out and muttered, "He's actually quite wealthy." Leaving the military vehicle and driver outside, Rory strode into the manor alone and headed towards the villa. He encountered no one along the way. Inside the villa, he could only hear music playing from a gramophone on the 2nd floor. Following the music, he arrived at a study, but it was empty. Just as Rory was about to explore other areas, the villa owner's voice came from behind him. "Excuse me, who are you?" Rory turned around and confirmed that the person was the survivor of the car accident. He wore a green suit, a yellow shirt, and white casual trousers, with a colorful scarf draped over his chest, a flamboyant outfit that exuded a gentlemanly air. Rory cut straight to the point. "I just saw you emerge unscathed from a car accident. I'd like to know how you did it." "Oh, sir, your curiosity is a bit too much. My name is Craig Hollis. May I ask your name?" Rory. Hollis, a cigar in one hand and a glass of red wine in the other, walked in, sat down on the sofa, and smiled. "Mr. Rory, there are superpowered individuals all over the world these days. There's nothing to be surprised about. The Battle of New York made the world aware of the existence of aliens, and after the cataclysm, superpowered individuals have become more active than ever before. The occasional appearance of a strange superpowered individual doesn't surprise the public too much." Rory pondered for a long time after hearing the name, finally remembering who it was. "Mr. Immortal." Hollis smiled and shook his head. "Someone did call me that before, but that was a long time ago. Mr. Immortal, also known as the Supreme Human, possesses only immortality. He can be killed, but he can resurrect infinitely. Even cataclysm cannot take him away. He revives quickly after death, and all previous injuries are healed, but non-fatal injuries heal at a normal rate. If there's a cut, the fastest way to heal is suicide." Rory walked over and asked curiously, "Mr. Hollis, are you sure you won't die?" Hollis raised his hand nonchalantly. "Actually, I've lived long enough, but..." Thud. Hollis suddenly stopped mid-sentence, slowly lowering his head to find a hand inserted into his chest. "You?" Hollis's head lolled to the side, "and he died instantly." "Rory?" After the finger was removed, something shocking happened. The wound on Hollis's chest was healing incredibly quickly, returning to its original state in just a few seconds. "Ouch, that hurts. You bastard." Mr. Immortal. Hollis woke up rubbing his chest, his face full of annoyance. "Rory, you're so rude." "Rip." "Ouch." Mr. Immortal. Hollis's arm was torn off by Rory. Several seconds passed, but instead of growing back, he screamed in agony. Laura then stomped on Hollis's chest, crushing the flesh, and the scream stopped abruptly. This time, a few seconds longer, the arm actually grew back, the collapsed chest cavity healed, and Hollis slowly regained consciousness. "Wait a minute, what do you want? I don't think I've ever offended you, have I?" Laurie's sudden attack had truly frightened him. Rory smiled and pulled out his work badge, saying, "I'm a research consultant at the military lab. I'm curious about you, so I'd like to invite you to collaborate on some related research." Mr. Immortal Hollis's body instantly shuddered, and he shook his head repeatedly, refusing. "No. I won't go. Get out of my house right now, or I'll call the police." Rory controlled his strength, punching Hollis unconscious, then hoisted him onto his shoulder and returned to the military Hummer. Drive back to base. Rory's face showed an excited expression, as if he had found a treasure. The military Hummer quickly returned to the military base, and Rory carried Hollis straight to the lab. "Clear the lab bench and go prepare my tools." First, he restrained Hollis with straps, and as he came over with a large syringe, Hollis slowly woke up. "Oh God, damn it, take the thing away from me." "Don't worry, Mr. Immortal, I'll be very gentle." Rory's actions were anything but gentle. He plunged the syringe into an artery and began frantically drawing blood, extracting a whole bucketful. Hollis's body visibly withered, then rapidly regenerated within seconds. "Damn it, you're committing a crime. I'm going to sue you. I'm going to put you in jail." Hollis struggled and roared frantically. Rory, gesturing with the needle, said, "Mr. Hollis, please be quiet. If you keep yelling, I promise I'll sew your mouth shut." Mr. Immortal Hollis instantly fell silent. Rory said nonchalantly, "Anyway, you won't die, what's there to be afraid of?" Hollis retorted, "But it will hurt a lot. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 49 Having too many wives is also a kind of trouble. Secretary of State Ross rushed into the lab. He frantically found Rory and demanded, "Rory, who did you kidnap?" A news article on his phone showed Rory carrying Mr. Immortal Hollis away from the manor. This news provided SHIELD with an excuse at a crucial moment, instantly turning Ross's initial advantage into a disadvantage. Seeing Rory's nonchalant expression, Ross said helplessly, "Breaking into someone's house and kidnapping them is one thing, but couldn't you have been a little more professional?" His wife not only released a video of the kidnapping, but she's also holding a banner in front of the Capitol demanding his release. "What am I supposed to do?" Rory, engrossed in his experiment, paused, turned to the other side, and asked, "You have a wife?" The lab table leaned against the wall, Mr. Immortal Hollis bound to it with layers of restraints. Hearing Rory's words, Mr. Immortal laughed awkwardly, more than one. Mr. Immortal Hollis hadn't uttered a sound since Ross entered, and Ross only now noticed that Hollis was still in the lab. The good news was that Hollis was alive, providing some closure for the public. The bad news was that everything he said had been overheard. If Hollis blurted out anything, his position as Secretary of State would be in jeopardy. Rory waved his hand. "He'll have to stay here for a while. You can let him call his family to reassure them. I'll release him after a while." Ross, afraid Hollis might say something inappropriate, tentatively asked, "Is that really okay?" "Don't worry, he's very sensible." Hollis quickly replied, yes, I'm willing to cooperate." The Immortal wasn't afraid of death, but of a living hell. He had tried various suicide methods, including jumping off buildings, taking poison, using bombs, and drowning, but none had killed him. It was said he could live until the end of the universe. But the Immortal, Hollis, absolutely didn't want to be repeatedly dismembered by Rory, didn't want to have his brain pierced by a drill as soon as he woke up, and even less did he want to be locked in a 50-centimeter thick iron box and thrown into the Atlantic Ocean. Cooperating obediently offered a chance to return, not cooperating. Hollis found the thought terrifying. After thinking it over, Ross agreed to Rory's suggestion. "By the way, how's the serum going? The experiment can begin anytime, as long as you can send me the test subjects." This wasn't really Rory's fault. Because of SHIELD and the Avengers' interference, Ross had to temporarily halt the approval of related experimental procedures. If Ross were still a lieutenant general, he wouldn't care, but he was now Secretary of State and had to abide by the rules. Secretary Ross had Mr. Immortal make a phone call to his wife before leaving the lab. He still had a lot of work to do, especially dealing with the accusations from SHIELD and the Avengers. Rory didn't care about anything else, he only cared about his experimental research. There wasn't much left to study with Captain America Steve's serum. Abomination's blood sample was quite special, containing severe gamma radiation. Strangely, Bronski's blood didn't contain radiation in his normal state, it only appeared after transformation. As for Mr. Immortal Hollis, based on current research, he was no different from an ordinary person. Rory still hadn't found the real reason for his immortality. Hollis had been strapped to the experimental table for 2 days, feeling extremely uncomfortable all over. Seeing Rory get up from the lab table to leave, he quickly called out, "Mr. Rory, please wait a moment." Rory turned around. "Mr. Hollis, is there something you need?" "Mr. Rory, actually, I'm also very curious about why I can't die. I'm willing to cooperate with your research. Could you please let me down?" "Don't worry, I definitely won't run away, and I won't contact the outside world. Actually, I also really want to get rid of those women. To be honest, they're always bothering me." Rory felt like he was in Versailles. Rory thought for a moment. Hollis only possessed the ability of immortality and couldn't cause him any harm. Keeping him bound wasn't very meaningful. So he walked over and untied the restraints, warning, "Don't even think about escaping. If I catch you, you'll be in a lot of pain. I'm doing this for your sake." "I understand, Mr. Rory. Don't worry, I'll go wherever you go and will never disappear from your sight." Regaining his freedom, Hollis was in high spirits and dared to say anything. It was lunchtime, and Rory had just left to eat. He wouldn't eat with the soldiers in the military camp. A special chef prepared his meals and delivered them to the lab. Hollis didn't stand on ceremony and sat down to eat with Rory, even pouring himself a glass of red wine. "Mr. Rory, is your superpower strength?" "I don't have superpowers." Rory was just an ordinary physics researcher. Coming to the Marvel Universe as an ordinary person, wanting to gain the power to protect himself was understandable, but there were always people who didn't want him to do so. Rory currently had 2 main hobbies, doing research and obtaining greater power through research. He also had a few smaller goals, such as taking down the Avengers and then returning to the 2008 universe to settle old scores with the Ancient One and the Avengers there. Hollis asked in surprise, "You don't have superpowers? You're lying, right?" Rory shrugged. "I research biological gene enhancement, obtaining greater power by constantly modifying genes, unlike people like you who are born with superpowers." Rory had come this far all by himself, no one was his backer. He'd suffered, he'd endured injustice, but so what? No one could stop him from becoming stronger, everyone who stood in his way would be crushed. Hollis muttered as he ate, "Actually, I wasn't born with superpowers. It's been so long, I don't remember exactly when, but something happened. It was like my soul entered some place and was absorbed by a light. When I woke up, I had these superpowers." Rory remembered Hollis's superpowers were a natural evolution, which was why he called him the Supreme Human. But thinking about it carefully, it didn't seem quite right. Even evolution should have a process, but Hollis skipped the intermediate evolutionary steps and jumped directly to the final point, which was completely illogical. While the Eternals possessed near infinite life, they could still die, and even after being modified by the Celestials, they remained within the realm of natural life. But the Immortal was utterly unreasonable, immortal and indestructible, his life form completely different in dimension. After lunch, Rory planned to conduct a test using the Celestial genes and Hollis's genes to see if there were any differences. Back in the lab, Hollis, now free, started playing games on Rory's tablet. Rory took the Celestial gene from the freezer to the microscope, added Hollis's blood, and began a cell biopsy. Just as the Celestial gene began to absorb cosmic energy and divide its cells after injection, Hollis suddenly yelled behind him, startling Rory who was holding the biopsy needle. "Silence. I'm doing it." Rory turned around and realized Hollis's condition was very serious. Chapter 50 seems to have discovered something extraordinary. Hollis's eyes were completely black, including the whites. The tablet was lying on the ground, and he stood there trembling, tilting his head back in a strange posture. Rui immediately turned on the camera to record. Time: 1:17 p.m. First recording of the Immortal Gene Test. After 3 days of testing, no immortal gene was found in the host's body. However, during the fusion of the Celestial gene, the host underwent unexplained changes. No obvious changes in the host's body, eyes are completely black, no energy coverage, suspected to be caused by elements in the brain activating the optic nerve. The body is in an unnatural trembling state, body temperature 43.5 degrees Celsius, cell burning affecting nerves, loss of self-control consciousness. After recording the physical characteristics, Rui took out a light wave imaging device, turned it on, and performed a full-body scan on Hollis. Abnormal neural activity in the brain, suspected energy interference. Just a few seconds later, the interfered light wave imaging device began to smoke and then went out. Rui couldn't sense any energy, so he immediately found a magnetic field detector. As soon as he approached, the magnetic field detector instantly exceeded its limit. Poof! The magnetic field detector also malfunctioned, leaving Rui completely stumped. Damn it, what's going on? All the electrical equipment in the lab began to flicker, the lights flashing on and off. Just when Rui thought something terrible was about to happen, everything returned to normal in an instant. Thud! Mr. Immortal Hollis collapsed limply to the ground, unconscious. Rui picked him up and placed him on the lab table, giving him a quick full-body check. His body temperature and cell activity had all returned to normal, only his brain nerves were still active. For example, when ordinary people dream while sleeping, it's a manifestation of involuntary brain nerve activity. If the brain nerve activity level of an ordinary person dreaming is set at level 1, Hollis's current brain nerve activity level is at least level 7 or higher. Although Rui didn't know what had happened to Hollis, he believed there was a very high probability it was related to the celestial gene. His cell puncture test and Hollis's condition occurred simultaneously, making it hard for Rui not to suspect this. He resecured Hollis with the restraints to prevent any mutations or sudden outbursts of madness. That's how it's portrayed on TV. A little precaution is never a big mistake. Even if it doesn't harm Rory, damaging the equipment or serum would be a problem. Not knowing when Hollis would wake up, Rory returned to the lab table to continue observing Hollis's cell fusion. What he saw shocked him. After so much time, Hollis's cells were still dividing. Rory quickly turned on the recording function of the electron microscope. If Hollis's cells contain immortal genes, plus the celestial gene's ability to absorb cosmic energy to create stem cells, my god! A perpetual motion machine? A cosmic god? If the cells contain immortal genes, plus the celestial gene's ability to absorb cosmic energy to supply cell division, theoretically, they could even reproduce indefinitely, until covering the entire universe. Theoretically possible, but truly achieving infinite reproduction is impossible. The amount of celestial gene Rory injected was very small, enough for only a single cell, and would disappear as energy supply dwindled after a certain amount. But what if both of these were injected into one person simultaneously? This idea was insane and dangerous, unless that person could withstand the energy of the entire universe without dying. Thinking of this, Rory turned to look at Hollis, who was still asleep. Rory really wanted to try, but he was afraid of messing things up. Ugh, what's wrong? Hollis slowly woke up, moved a couple of times, and found himself tied up again. He turned to Rory, who was still conducting experiments, and asked, Mr. Rory, why did you tie me up again? Seeing that Hollis was awake, Rory put down his tools and came over, asking, Mr. Hollis, do you feel any discomfort anywhere? Hollis frowned, felt around, and then shook his head, no. Rory continued to ask, think carefully about what you experienced before you passed out. Hollis knew that Rory wasn't joking, so he tried hard to recall everything that had just happened. After we finished eating, we went back to the lab. You went to do the experiments, and I sat on the other side playing games on my tablet, and then... Hollis was stunned at first, then his eyes widened in disbelief. I think I went to a very dark place, there was nothing there, and then a lot of golden light appeared. No, I can't remember the rest. Hollis's heart rate didn't stop after he fell into coma, indicating that he was just in a normal coma, not reborn after death. After listening, Rory nodded and comforted him, lie down and rest for a while, I'll finish the experiment and come back to untie you. Returning to the experimental table, he took out his notebook. In order not to leave the experimental data to the US military, Rory had been recording key data in a paper notebook, thought span, dimensional space not excluded, connection between celestial gene cells and the host's body, energy resonance. There weren't many clues, so Rory could only record the existing information. In the following days, Rory studied the connection between the celestial gene and Hollis's blood fusion every day. However, in many subsequent experiments, he was unable to induce the state that Hollis had previously experienced, which made Rory unsure whether it was caused by the celestial gene. Today, Secretary of State Ross and SHIELD were going to hearing together. SHIELD and the Avengers had only one demand, that the military revoke Rory's research consultant status. The reasoning was simple: Rory murdered 2 Avengers and wreaked havoc in Midtown Manhattan, nearly destroying the city. For national security reasons, Rory should be listed as a danger target, not employed by the military. Secretary Ross, holding the microphone, said, "First, I want to clarify that the Avengers operation was not authorized. According to the supplementary provisions of the Sokovia Agreement, the Avengers operation lacked legitimacy. We cannot judge right and wrong based on subjective opinions simply because the Avengers saved the world. Second, it wasn't one person who destroyed Midtown Manhattan, but a group, with Dr. Banner playing the biggest role." Ross held a deep grudge against the Hulk, first for seducing his daughter, then for absconding with military research findings. The subsequent capture operation caused significant losses to the military. Ross blamed everything on Dr. Banner. Whenever the Avengers were involved, Ross would criticize Bruce Banner. Ross glanced in the direction of the SHIELD and Avengers representatives, and said with a faint smile, "If you determine that Rory is in danger, or that he has done something heinous, please provide examples. Arguing against someone without evidence is equally criminal." Secretary of State Ross, having been a politician for some time, spoke sharply and logically, defending Rory from various angles. SHIELD and the Avengers could not provide evidence because things that hadn't happened in the future, or had occurred in other universes but hadn't happened here, could not be used as evidence. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.